שפיר קדמך להגביה יא ריבון העולם ויולמיה אנתו מלכה מלך מלכיה מלך מלכיה
אוי אדון הארץ בן רקיע ויפה הלל למלך הצורח הטבוע בנהר עושר זקוף קומה המלך היציב אלי תחתית נבוא נשמתנו להשיב אוי אדון הארץ בן רקיע ויפה הלל למלך הצורח הטבוע בנהר מוענו מלכנו הרב לעיקרי השב מן המתים יהוד יאור ירי נגיל ונזור נאסף חסדיך שלם ורב אתה מאוסף חלקיך החנות ותכריחי זרעך נבוץ הנצו שלוות שלום למלכים את יום עבדך יגיע אתייצב בפני שופט ליבי המץ תשקול על מאזני נוצת מופת ואם חיי וחטאי כבדו לנוכח מות רחמי אהובתך ספור פניך בירוק צובה המתח חי בנור חמול נשמת מנחה חסד החיות גמלת לכפר עונתך אוי אדון אדון לסבול בעל ארץ המנון לסבול בעל ארץ הרי ולידון כל יושבי הארץ הללו כבוד רוכב ערבות שימו כבוד ליורי הממדרים אמרו לבעל מעוז ומעל עליך ברוב עוד חייך חשוב אוי מזמור לאמתך קלת יופי, שמריני אשתורת כי חסיתי בך, אמרת למלאך לכלנה טובתי עלייך, בנותייך בצק תלושנה, ועץ ילקטו בנייך, יבערו אש אבותינו, כבנים ונסכים לעשות.
So, welcome back, everyone, and welcome, Graham.
Thank you, Ariel. Great to be back.
So, honestly, I kind of realized this at the last minute due to one of my classes, but I wanted to do something on January and Janus, and well, there's literally only one day left we can do that. So I figured, well, we were going to do it yesterday, but then I realized, well, we're probably going to do it late at night anyway, so it's just going to end up being the 31st anyway, so works out. We're literally at the last day of the first month.
Which fits for Janus.
Yep. Also, like, just kind of one vibe I was getting from the video towards the very end. You know, you have the two tunnels, and one the train goes into, and the other the train goes out of. I don't know, just a little something I noticed. But you know, at the end of the day, it's obvious, but just kind of the meaning you could assign to that. But yeah. So just for context, because we did have a comment. Lama Rakevet, which train, or wait, why the train? Sorry. So basically, the reason for the train is so that was from the Goddard Tunnel opening in, I think it was in Switzerland. Graham actually showed this to me today. I forget the context that it came up in, but I thought it was really interesting. And then, especially in the context of this idea of, you know, two paths, I felt that kind of fit in with the idea of trains, and also with the idea of doorways and opening the doorway, which is kind of, I mean, this was the like the unsealing, but really it was just the christening of the tunnel, basically. But yeah. So Graham, why don't you share why you decided to share this with me?
Oh no, we were talking earlier about various different occult things, and the ancient world and all that one, and that brought to mind the opening ceremonies in Janus. And again, opening ceremonies definitely ties to Janus, and like Ariel said, that was the opening to the Goddard Tunnel, which it's like over 50 kilometers long. It's like the longest, deepest tunnel, and it goes underneath the Alps. And if you watch there, you can see obviously a lot of the goat head, the fire. There's so much occult symbolism going on in there, and occult symbolism with the ceremony, with the opening of it. All of that just screamed Janus to me. So that's why it came up.
Interesting, yeah. It's, definitely the vibes I was getting. But something that I definitely think it's interesting how, I think a lot of people, given, it's not to say that, there aren't powerful people with, like selfish intentions, but at the end of the day, like, I don't know, just, I think that when people see this and immediately think, oh, evil, they're kind of like missing the point. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Well, those are people who tend to hear occult and think evil, as opposed to occult is just hidden and occluded.
Yeah. Though, what is it? I'm going to see if I can find. Is this trying to find one that's unedited? That way we could comment on it. I just want to make sure it's good enough quality. Auto. Oh no, this one's not good enough quality. Mind filling there in the meantime?
Oh yeah, no. We were talking about Janus, and Janus is very much a Roman god. It doesn't really have a Greek correlate. It's much
Really?
more like, Really? Yeah.
Interesting.
They took the thought is that Janus is a Roman adoption of Colsons, who's an Etruscan deity, and that was the male deity with two faces, and he was associated. The Etruscan deity was associated with city gates, and that's the biggest one that Janus is associated with as well.
Holy. Okay, this is interesting. Check this out. So, if I were to tell you, try to find a connection to Janus and Judaism, how would you do it?
Janus and Judaism.
Okay, so more so maybe not Janus in Judaism, but Janus in Judaism or Janus in a Hebrew context. Not necessarily like a syncretism of him, but I mean, there's very clear ones.
Well, I was going to say, Janus is clearly an antinomic aspect to him, so there's a certain Yahweh aspect there as well, because Yahweh is fairly antinomic. Where are you going beyond that?
So, yeah, here, I actually just found this. I mean, this is part of the reason why I love Safari. You can literally find, I mean, if it's there, you'll find it. So here, let me share my screen. So, is this the right one? Here. Check this out. Let's see, where is it? Oh, wait. So, and when pharaohs heard their words, so this is Sefer from Sefer Yashar, the Book of the Righteous. It's a midrash, translated by Edward B. M. Brown, New York, 1876. And when Pharaoh heard their words, he was exceedingly terrified, and he said unto them, "Go ye away today, and return tomorrow." Interesting how they have a dash between the two and the morrow and the two and the day. Interesting. So it seems like morrow was the original word, and then it's like to the morrow or to the day. And then the day would just be the day or today, which interestingly, the day is literally today in Hebrew. Like hayom means today. It's fascinating. It's like you can see the connections in this, like just by looking at the translation. Anyway, and when they had left him, Pharaoh sent for Balaam, the magician, and for Janus and Jambres, his sons, and all the magicians and sorcerers and counselors which belonged to Pharaoh. So it's very clear that this is a text that's being influenced by Hellenism, because they're putting Greek or Greco-Roman figures into a Egyptian context. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, and it also now has Balaam inserted into the Exodus story there, rather than in the conquest.
Interesting. I didn't even think about that. I mean, that there were different time periods, but yeah, you're right. So, and for all the magicians and sorcerers and counselors which belonged to Pharaoh, and they came and sat before the king, and the king told unto them all the words that Moses and his brother, and they said unto the king, and how could these men come before thee on account of the lions, which are chained to the gate? And the king said unto them, they have raised their rod upon the lions and released them, and they came before me, and the lions rejoiced with them, as the dog rejoiceth before his. Let's see. Interesting. It seems like it was just a single mention.
Yeah, I know. I was going to say one of the things that jumps out there as a possibility is the idea that Balaam and Janus and whoever the other one there was basically they were Etruscans that had come down to Egypt, and then Balaam ended up going over to Cana after that. Just a thought.
To where?
Over to Cana, where they ran into him during the conquest.
Wait, is Cana mentioned before the New Testament?
Well, I mean, the conquest of Cana after the Exodus.
Oh, sorry, Canaan. I got confused because there is a place called Cana.
Okay. No, I was talking the other one.
All right.
Yeah,
so,
no, not the wedding feast. No.
All right. Let's see. So, 1 second. Where was it? I just lost it. Shoot. I just have to find it again. Hold on. It's not. So, apparently, Janus is. Oh, interesting. I didn't even think about that, but that might be the connection. So once I can get this in, I'll be able to tell you what I found. So it's mentioned in Legends of the Jews, which I forget who wrote Legends of the Jews. Is it saying it's by Louis Ginsburg? That doesn't sound right. I think he's the one who translated it, unless I'm wrong. But anyway, so here. So let's see. So the nations at war. Hadad, the king of... Hold on. Let me get some music on in the background. Let's see. Where is it? Brand. Here. It's down here. One moment. Let's see, where is it? Sorry about this. It's hard to find the track I'm looking for. Oh, here. Here. Hadad. Wait, is it? Yeah, here we go. Hadad, the king of Edom, who had failed to gain fame and honor in the Egyptian campaign, was favored by fortune in another war, a war against Moab. The Moabites shrank from meeting Hadad alone, and they made an alliance with the Midianites. In the thick of the fight, the Moabites fled from the field of battle, leaving the Midianites to their fate. And these deserted allies of theirs were cut down to a man by Hadad and his Edomites. The Moabites saved their skins and suffered only the inconvenience of having to pay tribute. To avenge the faithlessness practiced against them, the Midianites, supported by their kinsmen, the sons of Keturah, who is she was one of the, in the Jewish tradition, she married Abraham after Hagar was sent away. The sons of Keturah gathered a mighty army and attacked them. Yeah, song's way too peaceful for this. Let's see, where is it? And then I'll just clip out the part before, because I will probably make a little clip of this. So, the nations at war. Hadad, the king of Edom, who had failed to gain fame and honor in the Egyptian campaign, was favored by fortune in another war, a war against Moab. The Moabites shrank from meeting Hadad alone, and they made an alliance with the Midianites. In the thick of the fight, the Moabites fled from the field of battle, leaving the Midianites to their fate. And these deserted allies of theirs were cut down to a man by Hadad and his Edomites. The Moabites saved their skins and suffered only the inconvenience of having to pay tribute. To avenge the faithlessness practiced against them, the Midianites, supported by their kinsmen, the sons of Keturah, gathered a mighty army and attacked the Moabites the following year. But Hadad came to their assistance, and again he inflicted a severe defeat upon the Midianites, who had to give up their plan of revenge against Moab. This is the beginning of the inveterate enmity between the Moabites and the Midianites. If a single Moabite is caught in the land of Midian, he is killed without mercy, and a Midianite in Moab fares no better. After the death of Hadad, the Edomites installed Samlah of Masrekah as their king, and he reigned 18 years. It was his desire to take up the king of Agnias, the old ally of the Edomites, and chastise Zepho for having gone to war with him. But his people, the Edomites, would not permit him to undertake that which was inimical to their kinsmen, and Samlah had to abandon the plan. In the 14th year of Samlah's reign, Zepho died, having been king of Kittim for 50 years. His successor was Janus, one of the people of Kittim, who enjoyed an equally long reign. Balaam had made his escape to Egypt after the death of Zepho, and he was received there with great demonstrations of honor by the king and all the nobles. And Pharaoh appointed him to be royal counselor, for he had heard much of his exceeding great wisdom. In the Edomite kingdom, Samlah was succeeded by Saul of Pethor, a youth of surpassing beauty, whose reign lasted 40 years. His successor upon the throne was Baal-Hamon, king for 38 years, during which period the Moabites rose up against the Edomites, to whom they had been paying tribute since the time of Hadad, and they succeeded in throwing off the yoke of the stranger. The times were troubled everywhere. Agnias, the king of Africa, died, and also the death of Janus occurred, the king of Kittim. The successors to these two rulers, Asdrubal, the son of Agnias, and Latinus, the king of Kittim. Whoa! then entered upon a long drawn-out war of many years. At first, the fortune of war favored Latinus. He sailed to Africa in ships and inflicted one defeat after another upon Asdrubal. And finally, this king of Africa lost his life upon the battlefield. After destroying the canal from Kitim to Africa, built many years before by Agnias, Latinus returned to his own country, taking with him as his wife Ushpizna, the daughter of Asdrubal, who was so wondrously beautiful that her countrymen wore her likeness upon their garments. Wow. I have so many thoughts on this.
Because one, I'm definitely seeing echoes to what I thought about with the relationship with the Etruscans there, don't you?
Well, I mean, I definitely see that as a possibility. Like, one of the things that Neil's been kind of trying to hammer through to some people, which I think he's probably onto something, that there's a connection between the Etruscans and the Phoenicians. And actually, so interesting, I think I might have sent this to you, but I'm not sure if you have you ever heard of not the Etrurians, because so Etruria was basically, like, there was no Etruskia, it was called Etruria. So the Etruscans were Etrurians, if that makes any sense. But have you ever heard of the Iturians?
Vaguely, there's so many of those people I've read about. Which ones were they specifically?
So this is the thing. It's really interesting. Here, let me see if...
Because you know what Kitim is traditionally associated with, right?
I'm guessing probably that would be maybe Troy?
Cyprus.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Where you're definitely talking about a seafaring people, which would definitely tie into both the Phoenicians and the Etruscan sort of situation. And you're dealing with somebody called Latinus, where there's clearly you're talking about Italy.
Yeah, and also that this is happening in Africa, and that he takes his wife Ushpizimna, which is a clear reference to what is it, Dido?
Yeah.
But yeah, and then not only that, but then you have, so just a few things to mention. Hadad. Hadad is another name of Baal. Baal Hadad. That's like, when we think of Baal, we think of Baal Hadad. This other one that's mentioned down here, Baal Hamon, this is more so like, I mean, it's tricky because there are some parallels, but more than anything, Baal Hamon is basically like, I don't know if it's an Egyptian form of a Semitic god or a Semitic form of an Egyptian god, but basically Hamon or Amun, the creator of the world, in some ways syncretized with Saturn. And then you have Baal Hadad, which is like more so like the thundering god. It's, you have these differences.
Well, another connection you have is like you have both Kitam the place, and then you have Kitam the person, who's Javan's son. And Answers in Genesis identifies that with the Greek god Cronus.
Wait, so, identifies who?
What's that? Identifies Javan's son Kitam with the Greek god Cronus.
Wait, Yavan, but that doesn't really make sense, because aren't there people who try to say that Yaphet is Jupiter?
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
I'm just reading off what Answers in Genesis has.
I know. I'm just saying, because if Japhet's son, descendant is Yavan, and then Yavan's son is Kitim, then it's implying that it's essentially implying that Jupiter came before Saturn.
Yeah, it was like that video I showed you where all of Hebrew history happened in Egypt, and they had Moses being Ramesses II, and then they had somebody later on being Cheops, and it's like, wait a second, that was 1,000 years early. It's like
that's nothing compared to the theory. I mean, and by theory I mean complete BS. There's no validity to it that I've heard, but basically this idea that the Bible actually happened in the Americas, not like what the LDS Church says. I'm literally saying they believe the Bible happened in America, not that the people who were in the Bible went to America. literally they think that the Bible happened in America. They think that Jerusalem is in Dallas. They think that that Phoenicia is, I think, California.
How did they explain everybody getting confused at one point in time and switching?
Maybe the Tower of Babel. I don't know. It's not consistent. I mean, you're asking for consistency from people who don't live in reality. So at the end of the day, not going to get very far. Anyway, so one thing that I did want to bring up though. So look at this. So you have Janus, one of the people of Kittim. So this almost implies that. So let's see. So yeah, wait, where's Kittim? Wait, in the 14th year, having been king of, does it mention Kittim before? It's like it's just kind of, it's strange because it almost seems like, is it saying that the Kittim are, wait, so yeah.
Kittim is a place.
Oh.
Cyprus was the usual, but it also tends to refer to like islands. So
So
this definitely has a sense of sea people sorts of setup.
that's what I was thinking. And so maybe it's this idea that like these are the different people who ruled in Egypt. So even if it's not at the same time period, it's using, well, because keep in mind Pharaoh. Which Pharaoh? It doesn't say, it just says Pharaoh.
Well, that's the traditional one. They're all Pharaoh. When in doubt, just refer to it as Pharaoh, and that's you have Pharaoh in the sense of the ruler of Egypt, but then you have Pharaoh like in the sense of Uncle Sam as almost like the symbol of Egypt itself.
So you know what's kind of interesting? I wonder. So there's Kittim. So so Kittim. It's a plural. So I mean, just keep that in mind. That the name seems to be derived from the fact that the islands are plural. And so with this, I wonder if you might actually have, like, what would the singular of Kittim be? Maybe it could be Ket. Ket would be, I mean, Ketim. No, it'd have to Kittim. Yeah, maybe it would just be Ket. But so you have Ket, and then you have Chet. Chet is the Hittites. And we know that there's this connection between, Rome and the Hittites via Troy, at least, even if it's just a fictive connection, even though it probably is more than that. It's probably an ancestral memory. But yeah, it says he sailed to Africa in ships. It's a definite parallel. But what I think is just really interesting is the mention of Janus, how Janus is mentioned as, of all things, a magician.
And when they're talking Asdrubal, they're probably actually talking about Hasdrubal, and that's coming out of Carthage.
Yeah, definitely. The name sounded so familiar, but it was like, So anyway, so let's continue. So Latinus did not enjoy the fruits of his victory long. Annibal, the younger brother of Asdrubal, and his successor in the royal power, went to Kittim in ships and carried on a series of wars lasting 18 years, in the course of which he killed off 80,000 of the people of Kittim, not sparing the princes and the nobles. At the end of this protracted period, he went back to Africa and reigned over his people in quiet and peace. The Edomites, during the 40 years of the reign of Hadad, the successor of Baal-Hamon. So yeah, here it's directly saying Baal-Hamon came before Baal-Hadad. It's saying that Ammon, came before Hadad, or, Baal. So basically, in the same way that the title of, and so this is actually the interesting thing. One might be able to argue that at a certain point, El held the title of Baal. Now think about this. Jews today consider El and the Tetragrammaton, Yod He Vav He, to be the same God. And at one point, Baal and the Tetragrammaton were understood as basically, it's not as simple as to say that like the Tetragrammaton and Baal were understood as the same, but essentially not like the Jewish understanding of this, but basically the, Canaanite, like Yod He Vav He, or Yahweh, however you would say it, even though it definitely wasn't Yahweh. So that's the only reason why I even feel comfortable saying that. It's a scholarly understanding. But the point is that Yahweh and Baal were understood as being basically just two names for the same entity. at least that's one of the theories. It's also possible they were basically twins, kind of like Jacob and Esau, but that they're basically that they have differences. I mean, there's so much reconstruction. We don't really know what
Yeah,
the truth
the
is.
way that I learned to keep track of that as far as with the ancient deities and that goes is in the sense of portfolios. What was underneath their power? What did they have domain over? And that's where you can find it easier to compare them and try to see parallels between cultures.
Definitely. Okay, so this is interesting. Check this out. So, the Edomites during the wait, where is this? The Edomites during the 48 years of the reign of Hadad, the successor of Baal-Hamon, fared no better than the people of Kittim. Hadad's first undertaking was to reduce the Moabites again under the sovereignty of Edom. So here it's associating Hadad with Edom. Now we know the god of Edom was Kos, and we know that Kos and Hadad, or essentially Kos and Baal, are very similar, if not the same gods. Basically, these three deities are probably connected. If not triplets, they're the same person, and they're basically just personified in three different ways, according to three different tribes. You have you have the Canaanites, you have the Israelites, and then you have, or actually, arguably, you have the Canaanites, you have the Midianites, and then you have the Edomites, and then the Midianite tradition gets borrowed or taken by the Israelites, who are an emergent group out of the Canaanites, and well, we all know that. But so the Moabites again under the sovereignty of Edom, but he had to desist because he could not offer successful resistance to a newly chosen king of theirs. One of their own people who enlisted the aid of their kinsmen, the Ammonites. The allies commanded a great host, and Hadad was overwhelmed. These wars were followed by others between Hadad of Edom and Abimenos of Kittim. So Abimenos, that's a very clearly it seemed so the Menos sounds Greek, but the Abi is definitely Semitic. So it sounds like we're starting to have this fusion of a new identity between, like, not quite Hellenistic, but Greek and Semitic. Are you picking up on that
Yeah,
at all?
yeah. No, I was looking up who Abimenos was, and they're talking about he executed Hadad, and I am so picking up on this. Is basically a chronicle of the whole Bronze Age collapse in the Sea Peoples.
Yeah. I wonder when was this written? So it's Legends of the Jews. What's it? The Legends of the Jews? Is that what this is? Yeah, Agudat HaYehudim. Yeah, that's this. The Legends of the Jews is a chronological compilation of Agadah, or stories, from hundreds of biblical legends in Mishnah, Talmud, and Midrash. The compilation consists of 7 volumes synthesized by Louis Ginsberg in a manuscript written in the German language. In 1913, it was translated by Henrietta Zold. Oh, wow. So it's like, I wonder, I'm going to have to look more into this. I probably going to have to talk to someone in the Jewish Studies department in my university, see if they know anything about this. Because today I was actually talking about the syncretism that, I forget if it was Aristobulus or was it? I forget. I forget who I'm talking about, but basically that there was a Hellenistic Jew who wrote about Hamor, the father of Shechem, actually being Hermes, the father of Sichemius. And like you just have a lot of these traditions that were being drawn, and it's also important to remember a lot of midrash was written during the Persian and later during the Hellenistic era. So even though these are being written as anti-Hellenistic, things like trying to establish what a Jewish identity really is, it's also being influenced by Greek identity insofar as it's counter to the Greek or counter to the Hellenism.
No, absolutely. No. This is fascinating in the sense of it definitely looks like a chronicle of, like I said, of a different take on the Bronze Age collapse. And you're talking, this is what, the 1100s BC, 1200s BC.
Wow.
And what they're referring to, like like Hadad and all that, they're clearly referring to like cities and peoples, like I said, in the sense of like Uncle Sam kind of thing.
Yeah. So like, and it's interesting because in some ways, okay, follow me here. So obviously, Yahweh as entity comes from Midian, at least it's literally what's written in the Torah. And so you have him being syncretized, or essentially taking on the role of El, who is Saturn. Now, who is Saturn according to, some of these syncretists back in the Hellenistic period? We even see Sanchuniathon, who's a Phoenician writing in Greek, writing about how Israel offered up his only begotten son, Yehud, in sacrifice to Shamayim, or the heavens, basically to Oranos, as a sacrifice. And basically that Israel and his wife Anobret, it's like the story is kind of, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense because the names don't connect, but basically that he was deified into the planet Saturn by the Phoenicians. Now, this isn't the story that's in the Torah by no means, but it shows that this idea of Israel goes back more than just the Bible. And that's not to say that means that the Bible was like, I'm not saying that means that the Bible's wrong or that it's taken from something else. I'm merely saying that the Bible isn't the first mention of these people. You see what I'm saying?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. No, and it's interesting to read this as sort of a part religious, part history sort of approach.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, we do have to remember this is all reconstruction, and we're reconstructing a reconstruction, so it gets even less reliable. But it doesn't mean it's not fun, and it doesn't mean that it's not worth looking into and establishing a scholarly argument if there is something to be said there. But I'm not going to. Yeah.
I was going to say part of it is you're trying to put something up there for other people to build off of. And the first time you do it, you're going to get some stuff wrong, but you hope you get at least enough right for them to build something worthwhile. Definitely.
So it's interesting. You have this mention, and it's like right after, it's just thrown in there. It's like it seems like it's just kind of thrown in there, and it's definitely something that we should read this sometime because it doesn't seem like it's terribly long. But I do want to get a bit back on track to the idea of Janus. So. Oh, but here, I did want to show you. So the Taurians, because this might be the connection that we're looking for. At least I think this. Let's see, is this? Yeah, here. So actually, shoot, I'm not risking this. I'm smarter than this. Why was I even thinking that? Here, I'm going to see if I can find one that's very clearly not from a documentary.
Oh my! I'm reading up there, Ariel.
What?
It's talking about Zepho won the decisive victory over the No, don't move anything.
Yeah.
And his first undertaking was a campaign against the sons of Tubal and the islands of the sea.
Tubal-Cain?
Yes, which is up Asia Minor, i.e. Turkey, Hittite area. And completely subdued them. Trojan War sort of stuff.
Interesting. That's what I was thinking. Thanks for finding that.
No, this is one of those where we need to sit down with a map and a chronicle and things like that and take this apart in detail and try to build correspondences as to who the people are and to just try to extract what sort of historical narrative they actually have here. That's a worthwhile project.
Definitely. So, shoot, what was it we were looking for? Oh, right, the Etrurians. That was what I was trying to find. Let's see, Etrurians. So, I honestly don't know. It sounds familiar, and I know better than to connect, false friends just because they sound similar. But it is just kind of, I don't know.
Well, it's
here.
not. My opinion is it's not wrong to make the natural connection. Just be willing to back away from it if it's not supported.
100. All right, here, this should be good.
The Jewish religion, I believe, like Hinduism, but I don't claim to be an expert, and please correct me if you think I say something that is not correct, but we have never been a proselytizing religion. We've never gone out there and captured a territory and say, all of you people must convert to Judaism.
Yeah, that's not true.
I was going to say the Maccabees, they kind of had a different approach.
Oh, Hyrcanus. So here you have this absorption of the Edomites. That's where Herod came from.
After conquering Edom, almost half of Judea's population was non-Jewish, which under Jewish law meant that nearly half the population was exempt from certain taxes as well as military service.
And you
With
can't
basically
have
no
that.
legal way to
I mean, literally, pulling the same stuff the Catholic Church did years later.
That sounds a lot like render unto Caesar what is Caesar's.
Render up unto Hyrcanus what Hyrcanus's is.
The other one I wanted to say is, you know that I have a lot of interest in Petra, and I think there's a whole lot more going on with Petra in that area than what has been explored.
Yeah. Also, do you know about Dushara?
A little bit. Refresh me as to where you're. Refresh me.
Well, here, I'll pull it up after this.
Okay.
But I've it pulled up on my phone, so I'm not going to forget. But I think he might have been connected with Dionysus, actually. I'm not 100% sure. Though.
But yeah, the first one they said not about converting. It's like, yeah, the Maccabees immediately popped to mind.
I mean, to be fair, Judaism, like, as opposed to, like, really, like, Judaism as we know it, I think you could,
Rabbinical Judaism is not. I think we'll be safe saying that.
Well, yeah, but I was trying to say that this didn't happen during a time you have any form of, like, what we understand as Judaism, but that's not true because this happened around, like, this would have been during the beginning of the writing of the Mishnah, or actually, I'm really rusty on the exact dates, but basically the point is that this is happening right along the times when the rabbis are starting to write the Talmud, and they're rejecting what the Maccabees did, primarily because they used war in order to get their goal. But more than anything, it's because of the fact that they ended up becoming Hellenists.
Definitely.
So it's like, it kind of makes you wonder, would things have been different if they didn't become Hellenists and they didn't do all this stuff? Like if they would have still been, domineering, would have the rabbis liked them? Like, if they would have been able to conquer back the land, but they just didn't happen to Hellenize? Like, it makes you wonder, because at the end of the day, it's all about this politics of power, and all too often people will be fine as long as they feel that it's fine for them. And I mean, this is universal to humanity.
There's another thought, is how much of the condemnation of the Maccabees by the rabbis came after the Maccabees had fallen out of power.
Oh.
And it's sort of like after the fact is, oh, well, people might have thought it was a great idea when they were winning. But when it turns out that was a false win and an Indian summer, and they ended up losing everything afterwards, it's like, oh, see, that was a bad thing now.
Mm-hmm. What's that term?
What, Indian summer?
Yeah.
That's from the Midwest. What happens is there's usually, like, in October, late September, early October, after fall sets in, you'll get a really warm patch where you'll get temperatures up around in the mid 70s to 80. It'll be like summer, but in the middle of fall. And it's basically it's related to the idea of Thanksgiving and the fall leaves and everything, and it was associated with the idea of that's the last warm patch of the year before winter hits.
So basically just another example of just throwing the word Indian before something because it's associated vaguely with the tradition of, or not even with the tradition, but with the American tradition of even thinking about indigenous peoples.
Well, Indian wasn't considered necessarily an insult then. It was it was just a Native American. It's like Indian corn for the multicolored corn. That's not demeaning to either the Indians or the corn. It was just an association.
Well, yeah, I guess all I'm trying to say is it's like it's drawing a connection that isn't even inherent. It's kind of it would be like, for instance, someone saying that something is a Jewish food, and then it turns out it's not even a Jewish food, just because someone thinks it is, and then people start calling it that. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. No.
But yeah, I don't know. I just thought it was interesting. But yeah, here.
To deal with this, Hyrcanus had the entire Edomite population forcibly converted to Judaism.
That's called creating taxpayers.
Well, how else are you going to build your state?
You got to finance it somehow.
Okay, that's stupid to say that because of that it's not the same. Like, no one ever said that all Jews are the same ethnicity. That's literally the whole point. Jews are of every color, every race, every background, because that's a thing. It's a religion. It used to be an ethnicity only. I mean, arguably an ethnicity and a religion only, but now it's both an ethnicity and a like. I guess it's kind of difficult because it was both an ethnicity and a religion before, but now it's like
I think
before.
you could almost claim it's bunches of little ethnicities because of how they split off over the years. Each of them, sort of in that separating into their own communities, like Sephardic versus Ashkenazi. They're kind of their own ethnicities separately. Does that make sense?
Definitely, but so yeah,
But
I mean,
yeah, no. I was with him right up until the point he jumped to converting Christians. It's like, wait a second, we were barely into the 1st century BC. Christians they're a good 100 years plus in the future, and he put the car in the lake for me at that point in time. And like you were saying, Ariel, it's one of the big things is Jews are people. Most Jews are really, really great people, and there are some Jews that they're kind of awful people, but they're kind of the minority of the Jews, just like they're minority of every other group. And anybody who tries to say all Jews are like the awful ones that go around converting people or dying, those are the people with the problem, because they're tarring and feathering with such a wide brush. Tagging to you, Ariel. Sorry to rant a little.
no worries. So let's see. So honestly, I'm not able to find a whole lot, but what I did find, I mean, so probably going to have some interesting thoughts on this. I know you will. I mean, I'm personally like I've heard both arguments, and I mean, honestly, I feel like at the end of the day, it's just so heated on like not to say that's like heated beyond the point of discussion, but it's like I don't know. Like I can see both sides, but I also see why there's definitely a reason why why Orthodox Muslims would want to avoid the implication of Petra having a connection because of the implication, which I don't even understand, because it's like, well, Petra was pagan. It's like, so was the Kaaba. I mean, like, regardless of where the Kaaba was, it had pagan idols in it. So, like, I don't get
Well,
why.
are you talking about the resistance to the idea that Petra might have been the first Mecca?
Yeah.
The reason for that is basically the way the
Assalamu
Quran's
alaikum.
written and what they call the standard Islamic narrative, has the current Mecca was always that Mecca. And in order to sit there and acknowledge the possibility that Petra might have been the Mecca before the current Mecca, they'd have to sit there and say there's a possibility that there are flaws in the standard Islamic narrative. And now they've crossed a line that it has a lot of implications that a lot of Muslims never want to cross, and they don't want anyone else to cross. Hence Salman Rushdie.
Do you think it has anything to do with the fact that if it was in Petra, then that means that the reason why it's so close to Jerusalem isn't because of Jerusalem itself?
As far as the idea of Jerusalem being the early site, I think the reason why the original reason why not Petra was a combo of the wars between the caliphates when they were switching from Damascus, and when it was the Damascus Persia sort of going against each other, and Petra was sort of had lost out there, and part of that I think was because of all the earthquakes that were happening right around that time, because they had some earthquakes that really basically disabled a lot of the water system in Petra, and and they basically had to more or less abandon the city as a capital regardless.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that I feel like if people like maybe because at the end of the day, I don't have a vested interest in either side, though I do think that there should be more discussion of Petra just in general. And then if there is anything there, it's like that would come to light. But I just so Amethyst says that yes, that Mecca was the Mecca. Because the Hijra was from Mecca to Medina, not from Petra to Medina, Yathrib. And I mean, I do have to admit that does make sense because the journey would be long. But I mean, so here, let's get into this video because I'm sure everyone.
No. That's we're going so far away from Jonas at that point. So
yeah. But so this the reason I pulled this up is because the connection to Dushara.
Another argument provided by Dan Gibson to prove that Islam started in Petra was the location of Dushara, the god of the Nabateans. And in his argument, Dan relied on the story of Prophet Muhammad's companion, whose name was At-Tufail ibn Amr ad-Dawsi. Let's go and watch.
Petra also has many temples. Over here is what is known today as the Temple of the Winged Lions, or the Temple to Al-Uzza. Behind me is what is known as Kesser al-Bint today, or the temple to the god Dushara. This short chain of mountains here was the home to the god, and here in the very heart of the mountains is the temple.
Wait, Kesser al-Bin? What does that mean? Like castle of Bin of the sun? I'm so rusty on like any little bit of Arabic I do know. Maybe Amethyst can tell us what Kasar al-Bin means.
To this god, El-Dushara.
Now, Ibn Hisham relates to us a very interesting story. It's very early in Islamic history. Only a few people have converted to Islam at this time. One of those was a man known as Al-Tufail bin Amr of Mecca. He accepted Islam on one of his journeys, and once he returned home to Mecca, his wife also decided to accept Islam. Al-Tufail then tells his wife to go to the temple of Dushara and cleanse herself there. In the sacred area, there was a trickle of water where she could wash herself. She did this and returned home and learned about Islam.
Did this story take place in Mecca, 1,000 kilometers away, where there is no temple to Dushara? Or did it take place here in Petra? If it did, then Dushara's temple is there. She would have come down to this temple, washed herself, and gone home. Is there a temple to Dushara in Mecca, in Saudi Arabia? No, there are no temples.
A very short clip, but still full of lies, distortions, misrepresentation, deceptions. Let's dismantle this argument little by little. First, they claim that Al-Tufayl was from Mecca,
One of those was a man known as Al-Tufail bin Amr of Mecca.
which is wrong. He was not Al-Tufayl bin Amr of Mecca. He was from a tribe called Daws. Daws was a tribe which lived south of Mecca in what is known today as Baha. So the companion's name was Al-Tufayl ibn Amr al-Dawsi. The YouTube documentary called him Al-Tufayl ibn Amr of Mecca. Second, they claimed that Al-Tufayl accepted Islam in one of his journey and then he returned home to Mecca. Then his wife accepted Islam, which is again false because Al-Tufayl ibn Amr al-Dawsi accepted Islam in Mecca and then he returned home. Then his wife accepted Islam. Let's go and read the story from the same source Dan Gibson used in his documentary. And let's see if the original story agrees with
Now,
what Dan
here's the
Gibson
point,
claimed.
Ariel.
Yeah.
What did what he just say there have anything to do with whether or not Petra was actually the original Mecca or not? I mean, he's like taking pot shots at something. Again, he's bringing up, as far as I can tell, very legitimate points, but it's not points that are central to Gibson's case. It's like I've read Gibson's case, and to me, the biggest one he has is geography, where he sits there and he basically traces the direction of the kibbas based off of how old they are. And with the earliest ones, and again, it's a question of what you find is the better fit. And
So have you seen that for yourself? Because like I know what argument you're talking about, but like, is this something that's actually confirmed, or is it an argument that's being presented? You see what I'm saying?
well, I haven't gone to all these different mosques in order to do the site survey to measure the direction of the kibbas myself.
So
And here's my point: is what level do I have to sit here and pare down in order to find it just a more convincing argument than the other one being presented? Because the other people aren't presenting even close to the argument I've seen from Gibson. They're just saying, we have this, 1,000-plus-year-old tradition. You have to believe us. And again, they can believe whatever they want, but them believing and saying that I have to believe it isn't a convincing argument. Tag.
So yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is this is literally something that you could probably check using. I mean, you'd probably need more advanced tech than just Google Maps, but
No, it wasn't Google Maps. They did papers on it. They had people who went and did site surveys of the different mosques, and they charted where the kibbutz directions was, the original kibbutz directions, and they pretty much originally, the earliest ones pointed towards Petra. Then once the dynasty wars started, they really didn't point so much to Jerusalem, but you had a couple of them pointing to kind of halfway between Damascus and Petra, which looks a lot like Jerusalem. And then it was only after the Caliphate Wars settled, and it was at that point, it was well over 100 years after the prophet died, that they actually finalized the Quran and the traditions and everything. Again, not very much similar to the whole Jesus thing, where you're trying to figure out who was the actual historical Jesus. There's every bit the legitimate questions as to, for skeptics, who the historical Muhammad was. And that's a very hot topic for exploration.
yeah,
I was going to say the other one I was going to throw is my working my working model for Petra is I really think Petra is what happened to Korah after the fight with Moses, where him and all of his wealth was swallowed into a hole into the desert, which is exactly what you can describe Petra as, a whole lot of wealth in a hole in the desert.
Maybe, but I mean, again, it's
Like I said, it's a working theory.
yeah. So I guess the one response though that people would probably have to what you were saying about the location is that they could have gotten the location wrong, and like a little bit of error, and you could have a different implication just from how a few different ones. I mean, given this is the reason why I think it would be interesting to look at like what it is as opposed to the claim, because obviously the claim sounds good, but like to actually check it to see if the data that they have actually does line up to what they're saying.
Yeah, no, and you're saying exactly what I do is I sit here and I go with a best fit. It's a abductive logic as Peirce developed in the 1800s, where you get deductive, inductive, and then abductive logic, and it basically produces as a probabilistic best fit. And that's what I go with the understanding of, hey, I get more data all the time, and once I get enough data and it points to a better fit, I just switch. It's really easy for me, and I don't get overly attached to anything unless it has a high probability or I have some sort of like indisputable mathematical proof. Otherwise, it's all a question of probability that I'm willing to switch off of if somebody gives me the proper data to do so.
Mhm.
This is from Sirat Ibn Hisham. If you read from the fourth line from the top, it says that At-Tufail used to say that he came to Mecca when the apostle was there, and some of the Quraysh immediately came up to him. So At-Tufail came to Mecca as a visitor. Let's carry on. They told him that his fellow had done them much harm, had divided their community and broken up its unity, separating a man from his father, his brother, or his wife. So it's clear from the story that At-Tufail was a stranger to Mecca because the Quraysh tribe was talking to him about Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and what harm he had allegedly done to them. If At-Tufail was from Mecca, he need the people of Quraysh to tell him about Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, right? He would have known. So here we prove that At-Tufail was not from Mecca. And we used the same source that Dan Gibson used in his documentary. And here's another evidence from the same account, which proves that At-Tufail was not from Mecca. Let's read the last 3 lines. At-Tufail says, "Then I preached Islam to those, but they held back, and I went to the apostle in Mecca." Do you see how he clearly differentiates between the place where he preached Islam to his tribe and the place he talked to Prophet Muhammad? He said, "And I went to the apostle in Mecca." If those was already in Mecca, then why would At-Tufail need to say, "Then I went to the apostle in Mecca"? Now that we knew that At-Tufail was not from Mecca, and now that we knew that the conversation he had with his wife about Dushara was not happening in Mecca, it is clear that Dan's argument about Dushara is self-refuting. Because if anything this story shows us, it is the fact that Dushara did not exist in Mecca because At-Tufail.
How is this refuting Dan Gibson's argument?
You're seeing what I'm talking about. He's doing an ad hominem attack on Gibson, and again, as I sat there and said earlier, Gibson may have totally blown the point on this dude being from Mecca, but that's not really crucial to Gibson's point.
Well, not only
And
that,
well,
but
I was going to say another point here is one of the things I've learned about Islam is there's a lot of appeal to authority is not a logical flaw in Islam. That's a feature, not a bug.
I mean, to be fair, you have the same thing in Judaism. The only difference is that it's not just purely authority; it's authority based off of. Which I mean, I think you do have in some ways in Islam. The only difference is that it's a bit inverted in terms of like like as long as you can prove a connection to actually I don't want to misspeak because I don't know this well enough.
Well, one of the big differences I see is it's the difference between a single interpretation and a pluriform interpretation. If you come to a different interpretation in Judaism, you're not inherently wrong. In Islam, there's only one proper interpretation, and that can be argued with through various scholars and reasonings. I'm just pointing out the difference between the two faiths.
I mean, to be fair, there's not just one. There's multiple traditions, but you have to stay within the tradition.
But the pluriform is very much more of a feature of Judaism as opposed to Islam, where they have basically, that's where they have it's the authority from the down from the from Muhammad, and for a lot of them, it's always based off of the head person is the arbiter as to which of the interpretations is the right one at any point in time. There are the other ones that are still existing on the book, sort of like the U.S. Constitution. But there's always one right one at any given point in time. You have one person who's authorized to make that call. It's pretty much how all the different Islamic faiths break it down, as far as I can tell. Again, I could be totally off base, but that's the pattern I see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Tag it to you.
Yeah, and thanks, Amethyst. I know I'm free to give my opinion. It's not that I'm afraid or anything. It's more so I just don't want to misspeak because, in general, I try not to speak about something unless I know for certain. And if I don't know, I try not to say, or at least I'll say that I don't know. But, especially when it comes to, I feel more comfortable speaking about Christianity because I know more about it. But, it's like at the end of the day, I don't think that it's, because of the, because some of the, the heatedness of, when it comes to Islam. I don't think that's it at all because, maybe it would be different if I had, a more Muslim audience, but at the end of the day, I just don't want to misspeak because, I'm studying to be a scholar and I don't want to be throwing out just speculation. Especially, I don't want to say something that someone can later clip and be like, oh, see, they don't know what they're talking about. So, more than anything, it's just trying not to misspeak, but thanks.
I was going to say, you can sit there and push it all off onto me because I misspeak all the time. I don't mind owning that I make mistakes. People clip me making mistakes. That's one of a bunch, That's one of the reasons I'm more scholar than academic.
Fail asked his wife to go near the Shara after he came back from Mecca. And after his wife accepted Islam, he tried to preach to his people. And when they rejected, he went back to Mecca to meet the Prophet. So the most evident conclusion of this story is that Dushara and Prophet Muhammad ﷺ existed in two different places. Thanks, Mr. Dan Gibson, for refuting your own theory with your own arguments. Now, there's one thing that we need to explain before ending this video. For the purpose of not leaving any unanswered question, you might be wondering, do I suggest that At-Tufayl ibn Amr al-Dawsi lived in Petra? Well, no, I'm just using Dan Gibson's own argument to refute his Petra nonsense. Because At-Tufayl lived in Daws, and Daws is in Baha, south of Saudi Arabia. So why are they talking about Dushara in Daws when Dushara was in Petra? Simple.
To be fair, it would make more sense for him to be foreign to Petra than to be foreign to Mecca. Because, he could be foreign to Mecca, but if he's from Daws, and that's much closer to Mecca, it seems like he would be much more familiar with Mecca than he would with Petra. But again, if you're not comparing the two, it's hard to really establish that it says one versus the other. But so the thing
and the other important one is Dushara is going to be worshipped in various locations across, pre-Islamic Arabia. It wasn't isolated to just one given location or another. Like Alat was just not one temple.
Yeah, Alat had a lot of places she was worshipped at. She was worshipped a lot in a lot of places. Alat was worshipped a lot in a lot of places.
And same thing with Dushara, and that's where he's, playing a little fast and loose with traditions. Is Dushara could have been in Petra, could have been in the current Mecca, and that's where part of the problem that the refutation is. Dushara was definitely in Petra, and you have Dushara was, probably one of the goddesses in the Kaaba, in the Kaaba that got tossed.
Yeah, so Dushara was
Was the god? Okay.
syncretized with Dionysus and Zeus.
Okay, gotcha.
This book, which was dedicated to Frederick Ward Putnam, in page 589, the authors write, "In the territory of those tribe there was a hema dedicated to him, and in it a pool of water, in which probably worshippers had a ceremonial bathing." In the same book, the author says, "The cult of Dushara prevailed over the region extending from the north border of Yemen through the desert up to Syria." So the idol of Dushara
So
was
that could include
worshipped in many places in the Arabian Peninsula. If a
Yeah,
tribe from
his
South
own thing there
Arabia
kind of
wanted to
undermined himself
worship
too.
Dushara, they wouldn't have to travel all the way to Petra in order to worship it. Each tribe, each city will have their own place of worships. And likewise, those, they had what they called a hema, a sacred area, where killing, slaughtering animals, cutting trees was prohibited. Finally, as you have seen, this evidence provided
like
by Dan
seriously,
Gibson proved him to
not-
be a liar, a deceiver.
I'm not saying it's Petra, but like, does this guy not realize that he's actually supporting Dan's argument? The idea of then again, I guess to be fair, this would be something to look into. How many Arabic tribes like had a hema within their own tribal region? Because it could be something that is a nothing burger, or it could be something that is like ding ding ding.
Oh, exactly. I don't know whether they did or not. I know for certain Petra had a big location. That was the center. That was the center of the trading of the caravans at the time. So it was very much an idea of that the Hajj concept for there to worship was there something similar that was existing in Petra pre Muhammad. So, there are definitely some precursors already existing at Petra. And, where I have it is he's just about there. He then slides into, he just starts this emotional lashing of Gibson. He's a liar. He's a deceiver. It's all these nasty, again, Gibson's either right or wrong. There's no reason to sit there and throw all that venom at him, at least in my opinion. I'm going to tag to you at this point.
Yeah, so one thing I noticed, though, I mean, because you have to keep in mind, it's not just from Arabia, and it's not just from Arabia, because you have to keep in mind the trade routes were starting in India, and basically, for all intents and purposes, and also, I mean, so there's another thing, because you had piracy, and it was hard to get things past the like basically you could land in Aden, but once you went into the Red Sea, it was filled with piracy, and so a lot of people used land routes, and so you could argue that Mecca being on the way between between Yemen and the King's Road, or basically the Levant.
The problem is the archaeology doesn't support that claim for the current identification of Mecca.
So
it does for Petra was the location of the trading capital, and it had been for thousands of years.
Okay, so this is interesting. So Amethyst said, from what I'm aware, the north side of the peninsula of the Arabian Peninsula used Silk Road to trade to the east, but the south side of Arabia used the sea route to trade. So maybe I am misspeaking that that they did use the Red Sea. Probably. I mean, so I would.
The problem with that one is the Silk Road runs further north. the Silk Road tends to run either above or below, like the Caspian Sea, and above the that's north of the Himalayas. So the Arabian Peninsula wouldn't it connected to the Silk Road up around in the Syria area around Damascus. It's like the Silk Road came in and that connected via the Damascus Ugarit area.
So Amethyst said, I know this because my country itself is the main port between Western and Eastern Sea route, the Malacca port. Wait, Malacca.
He's talking about the sea route in between Arabia and India, and no, they're definitely true there, and that was where the trading went there, because you were talking about the Red Sea pirates, and those would not impact the trade route from India to the Arabian Peninsula.
Yeah, the other thing that I was going to say though, so if we open Google Maps, because you have to keep in mind that North Arabia did have a connection to the Silk Road via here. One second.
North Arabia has almost nothing, because it's sort of like that was one of the problems back in the ancient days, is you really couldn't go across from Babylon to basically Petra very well. You had to go, in a lot of ways, the easiest way was up the rivers over to the Mediterranean and down south again.
There was a corridor in between North Arabia and Iraq.
But it wasn't good for mass travel. There were some traders who would take it, but for mass travel, you couldn't take an army or anything across that.
Which is maybe precisely why it was so useful for trade, because it wasn't easy to ambush. Or, well, actually, I guess you could argue that would make it easy. Well,
and that was exactly why Petra was so strong. Is Petra was basically impenetrable. Is you had armies where if you tried to attack them, you couldn't take them out. They could basically, they knew where all the water was. You couldn't have any resources. Your supply chains were bad. And no, they had the stories about Petra are very fascinating.
Wait, you're saying that Malacca, but here it's saying Malacca is all the way in Malaysia. Are you from Malaysia, or am I way off here? Anyway, we should probably get back on track. So,
but no, the old trading and the trading ones, because you get much into you get into the Rodenites once you get into the Islamic era, and you get into and they are a fascinating group.
Yeah.
Fever and exposed the ignorance and absurdity of his claims. First of all, At-Tufail was not from Mecca. He was from Daus. Second,
Okay, so he's just repeating the same things he was saying before. I'm just trying to save as much time as we can. So, here, I'm just going to throw on something about Janus. That way I have a little time to drink some water, clear my throat. Let's see. Let's see.
Because I've seen people who bring Janus into almost anything. There's a guy, I forget which channel he is, but he basically he does his tracing of Janus through all parts of history, and everything's related to Janus.
Oh my. Okay, so this is going to be hilarious. So this person is, I think they might be some. Let's see. Yes, Malaysia. Islam came to us via Arab traders in the late 13th century. The king of the Malacca embraced Islam, so the kingdom became Muslim. Interesting. So, so this person who made this video is actually an anti-pagan. So in that context, that's why they're going to take such a strong stance against Janus. But again, we're not here to judge. We're literally just here to study the connections or the symbolism. At the end of the day, I'm not saying you should worship Janus, and I'm not saying that Janus is evil. So, it's up to you.
I do reserve the right to make fun of silly things that people say on these videos, though.
Really? I thought I took that away from you.
Nope. I reserve that one.
Janus, the god of the new year. Which it's also interesting because
takes over after Saturnalia.
So
interesting.
not only that, but there's some connections that I found between this and Rosh Hashanah. It's well, I'll bring it up when we get there.
The New Year, observed and celebrated in the month of January, has many abstract and esoteric meanings, none of which are ordained by the Most High. The earliest recorded festivities observed as the start of a new year date back some 4,000 years to ancient Babylon. For the Babylonians, the first new moon following the vernal equinox, the day in late March with an
Janus
equal
is
amount
a
of
Roman
sunlight and
god.
darkness,
Well, technically
herald the start of a
Etruscan.
new year.
Well, derived from an Etruscan.
They marked the occasion with a massive religious festival called Akitu, derived from the Sumerian word for barley, which was cut in the spring, that involved a different ritual on each of its 11 days. In addition to the new year, Akitu celebrated the mythical victory of the Babylonian sky god, Marduk, over the evil sea
I'm
goddess
sorry,
Tyr,
but
and served an important
this doesn't have any connection to Janus. No, it doesn't. Like, you can try to say they're both New Year's, but no, different thing, totally different. And this is why it's so important that, you know, that there's real scholarship and not just people saying, oh, look here, these are two New Years, they're the same. Like, no, they're different. They're the same.
You don't understand, Ariel. They're both pagan, therefore they're the same.
I didn't consider that. Sorry.
You're trying to look too close. All you need to know is they're pagan. They're not what God wants. And hey, get some nice production values. You got a video.
political purpose. It was during this time that a new king was crowned, or that the current ruler's divine mandate was symbolically renewed. In the 3rd millennium BCE, the Sumerian population of southern Mesopotamia celebrated the festival of the sowing of barley. It was celebrated in the first month of the year, that is, in March, April. In the Babylonian calendar, this month was also known as Nisanu, and in the modern Jewish calendar is still called Nisan. Since the festival was celebrated on the first days of the Babylonian year, we can call it a New Year's festival. In fact, the ancient Babylonians already called it beginning of the year. The festival was celebrated on 2 locations in Babylon, in the temple of the supreme god Marduk, the Esagila, and the house of the New Year, which was situated north of the city. The 2 gods who were in the center of the festival were Nabu and his father, the supreme god Marduk, who was in the 1st millennium BC usually called Bel or Baal, meaning Lord, because his real name was considered too holy to be pronounced. The Akitu festival continued for centuries, and not only in Babylon. In Palmyra, the temple of Baal was
So,
inaugurated on the
I mean,
same
keep
day
in mind,
as
not to the relevant part yet, but his name was too holy to be said. Who's that sound like?
Oh, exactly. And you had the goat-headed dude from the beginning ceremonies that we had earlier, that you started from.
Wait, what are you talking about?
Oh, the tunnel opening ceremonies where you had the goat-headed guy going around and slaying all the people.
Wait, yeah, but who are you saying? Like, what's the connection between that and?
Oh, and just the video before in Baal, they had they had a picture of Baal instead of Marduk next to Nabu, just a little bit earlier in the video.
Oh no, what I was saying is that Baal is also Yahweh.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely, or at least some correlates to him. Not to step on too many toes there.
Yeah, try not to piss off every religious community that's out there.
Or piss them all off equally.
Yeah. Let's see. Where is it? Oh, here.
Akitu. At the beginning of the 3rd century CE, it was still celebrated in Emesa, in Syria, to honor the god Elagabal. The Roman Emperor Heliogabalus even introduced the festival in Italy. Throughout antiquity, civilizations around the world
That's
developed
huge, by the way.
increasingly sophisticated calendars, typically pinning the first day of the year.
Care to expound?
Elagabalus is one of those Roman emperors that he needs more examination as to what happened under him because of the religion he brought over, how he changed the situation in Rome religiously, and he brought over that black stone that, again, I'm very suspicious that that's the black stone that ended up in Mecca.
I mean, that's definitely a claim, but
Notice I said I'm suspicious. That makes it a claim.
But the what I was going to say, do you think there's a connection between the stone of Kybele and the stone of Elagabalus?
Oh yeah, no, exactly. I thought that was the stone he took over. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, we can be honest with our opinion without any insults. I don't know what that's in response to, but it's true.
To an agricultural or astronomical event. In Egypt, for instance, the year began with the annual flood of the Nile, which coincided with the rising of the star Sirius. The first day of the Chinese New Year, meanwhile, occurred with the second new moon after the winter solstice. As time passes, January 1st becomes New Year's Day. In Daniel 7:25, we see that the ruling agents would claim legislative authority so as to change times and laws, clearly referring to a man-made system that would hide established times and laws of the Most High. But why? What are they trying to hide? Genesis 1:14-18. And Elohim said, "Let lights come to be in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and appointed times."
Wait, I want to see if we can skip to the part with Janus in
Let them
it.
be for lights in the heavens, which each knew,
Here.
and to separate the light to rule the night, and the stars also. And Elohim
Whatever.
set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And Elohim saw that it was good. The early Roman calendar consisted of 10 months and 304 days, which each new year beginning at the vernal equinox. According to tradition, it was created by Romulus, the founder of Rome in the 8th century BC. A later king, Numa Pompilus, is credited with adding the months of Januarius and Februarius. Did you know? In order to realign the Roman calendar with the sun, Julius Caesar had to add 90 extra days to the year 46 BC when he introduced his new Julian calendar. This ancient Julian calendar, which went through a few refinements in the year 1582 by Roman Catholic Pope Gregory XIII, is now known as the Gregorian calendar. In medieval Europe, Christian leaders temporarily replaced January 1st as the first of the year with days carrying more religious significance, such as December 25th, the anniversary of Jesus' birth, and March 25th, the Feast of Annunciation. Pope Gregory XIII re-established January 1st as the New Year's Day in 1582. The practice of making resolutions for the new year is thought to have first caught on among the ancient Babylonians, who made promises in order to earn the favor of the gods and start the year off on the right foot. They would reportedly vow to pay off debts and return borrowed farm equipment. January 1st, however, remains from more than 2,000 years ago as the beginning of the Roman year, a creation of the Roman Empire. Janus, the Roman god of doors, gates, and transitions. The month of January is named after an ancient Roman god named Janus, who was the Roman god of doorways and archways, depicted as having two faces, as the Romans believed he looked at the future as well as the past. In Roman mythology, Janus acted as the supreme mediator between two pathways, which expressed itself in duality.
Oh, wow.
Janus was therefore deified
That's like
as
this
the god
association
of
with
dimensions.
Asherah.
Janus
The
was
idea of
known
the
among
good
the
path.
Romans as the initiator of human life, transformations between stages of life, and shifts from one historical era to another. According to Roman mythology, Janus was present at the beginning of the world. As the god of gates, Janus guarded the gates of heaven and held access to heaven and other gods.
So I wonder if he was
For
referred
this
to as
reason,
Alpha and
Janus was
Omega.
often invoked first in ancient
Or-
Roman religious ceremonies and during public
No.
sacrifices. Offerings were given to Janus before any other deity. His insignia were thus the keys which open and close the door, and the stick virga, which porters employed to drive away those who had no right to cross the threshold. His two faces, Janus bifrons, allowed him to observe both the exterior and interior of the house and the entrances and the exits of public buildings. Janus was also called Chaos at the time when air, fire, water, and earth were all a formless mass. When the elements separated, Chaos took on the form of Janus. His two faces represented the confusion of his original state. For this reason, the Romans ascribed to him an essential role.
Are you getting demiurgic vibes out of this?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's the other one. Are you getting any echoes to those double letters that we did with the with the Sephira?
Ooh, I didn't even think about that, but yeah, you're right.
And that's what I'm looking at it. Is Janus the passive god of doorways and basically crossroads? Or is Janus more of an active god that forces the choice in between?
I think in some ways that's the duality. He's both.
And how much of this is hitting into Hermes territory?
In what way?
Well, Hermes was the god of boundaries, of travelers, of so they're kind of like two sides of the same coin as well. Where Janus is the god of the doorway and Hermes is the god of the traveler that goes through.
So it's interesting because have you ever heard of the idea of the Book of Life?
Well, which version? Are you talking about the book that everybody's name's written onto that's going to have eternal life?
So yes and no. I mean, I guess you could view that there's maybe two, but I mean, so I guess here's the thing. There's two ways of looking at it. The Book of Life, so there's a Book of Life and the Book of Death. Every new year, people are either inscribed in the Book of Life or the Book of Death. So it's not this idea that being inscribed in the Book of Life means that you'll live forever. It literally just means you're going to make it to the next year. That's all it means. So if you're, Hermes was also a messenger of God, you're right. But so something that's important to point out here, though, is that this idea of, what are we talking about?
We're talking about Book of Life, Book of Death,
Oh.
and you were going with more of the Jewish tradition, and I was pulling from more of the, again, more of the Christian sense of the final day of judgment Book of Life, where those are the people who's going to make it at the final day of judgment. And it's been written in since the beginning of time.
Well,
And before I tag out, I'm just going to add there were other ancient things like the tablets of destiny and such that are similar to that.
so
Tagging to you.
So note what you said. The final day of judgment, not the day of judgment. So there's probably this idea of the Book of Life and then the Book of Life.
Makes sense. A yearly one and then a big one at the end to sum them all up.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess you could see how Christianity kind of fits into that same paradigm of, well, you have the yearly sacrifice and then you have the permanent sacrifice. And given this isn't a Jewish idea, because the idea of human sacrifice is important to Judaism, and I mean, anyone who wants to imply that that's not the case is basically arguing from the Canaanite tradition. And I mean, I don't have an issue with that, because I tend to think that's where the Israelite tradition originates from. That doesn't mean that I don't think that the Israelite tradition was more moral. I just also think that people have this hardline view of the Canaanites were evil and the Israelites were good, when in reality it's a moral revolution that took time. And at a certain point, the two people were basically indistinguishable.
Yeah, and part of what you're saying is just because it's important to Judaism doesn't mean it's something that Judaism practices today or should practice.
Kind of. I mean, like, given, like, for instance, this I guess the point in saying is that I do think that there were things that the Canaanites did that were abominable, but there's also things that the Israelites did that were abominable. There's things that everyone does that are abominable, but that doesn't mean that, like, because of that, that means that the Canaanites are the bad ones and the Israelites are the good ones. That's just how the narrative's written. And I tend to think that the two peoples are actually the same, and eventually you have all the Canaanites essentially becoming Israelites, whether they want to or not.
Well, I think it depends on which authors you're reading. I think if you're reading the Israelite authors, you're going to read that the Canaanites are awful. And if you're reading the Canaanite authors, you're going to hear how awful the Israelites are.
Yeah.
So, again, it all depends on which perspective they're writing from.
Of the world. To them, he was Janus pattern, the father of gods. Now that we know the-
Interesting. So it almost seems like Janus, in a certain context, was understood because he was the god of beginnings. He literally had to be the god at the beginning. Are you getting that?
Yeah, and they're very much getting that whole antinomic Alpha Omega Yahweh aspect going on here too.
Fascinating.
origins of these traditions, do we continue to celebrate them?
I mean, why not? I guess the only reason you wouldn't is if you have a religious reason not to. And it's like, honestly, I mean, at the end of the day, no one's going to say that you're wrong for not celebrating a holiday. I mean, there's plenty of people who choose not to celebrate New Year's just because they're sick of it. I mean, like, at the end of the day, should they be judged? No. Should someone be judged because they're not celebrating something because of their own religion? No. That being said, I don't think it's evil. Like, I think it's only evil if you view it as evil to do things that are associated. But then again, it's kind of like, well, how many Christians wear Hermes or I honestly I don't know a whole lot of like fashion brands because I really could care less about fashion. But and then you have you have like I think is there Pegasus? I'm not sure. But basically, I mean, like the point is that this stuff is so ingrained in our culture, and if you're just being selective with what you're choosing, like, oh, I'm not going to celebrate this because it's pagan, but meanwhile you have a
Christmas tree.
I mean, to be fair, you could argue it has an origin within an Israelite context, given that's not how it gets put into it. But okay, let's say that you shoot, what's that? Wow, this is okay. Say you have a Saturn. Say you're a Christian who drives a Saturn. Are you committing not adultery, idolatry, because you are a Christian who is driving a Saturn car? I mean, like, anyone who would make that claim would frankly be ridiculous. Like, at the end of the day, if you're celebrating New Year's and you're not worshiping Janus, I'm pretty sure that Jesus knows what's in your heart. Like, I don't think Jesus is going to smite you because you celebrated New Year's Eve or because you celebrated Halloween. And frankly, like, anyone who claims that is just, I mean, frankly, that could be your religious view. I personally think it's ridiculous because it's completely ahistorical. There were harvest festivals. Also, Halloween is not about inviting in the spirits. It's literally about keeping them away. And so it just shows a lot of people who argue that, I'm you keep away from that. And a lot of times it's actually just reactionary behavior. It's not actual knowledge of any prohibition against this tradition within the Christian or Jewish or various traditions. I mean, I guess in Judaism, there's maybe a bit more strictness because you don't have the same syncretic tradition. I mean, arguably you do, but the rabbinic tradition tries to go against that. And so because of that, you have this absorption of other culture, but within an inherently Jewish frame. So, like, even though you have stuff that's reminiscent of other cultures, it's inherently divorced from any of the paganism that's there. If that makes any sense. Amethyst says, "My country is so multicultural that we celebrate every kinds of festival, but we didn't do it out of worship, but out of friendship." And yeah, I mean, I think that's really the way that most holidays are in America, for instance. And like at the end of the day, that doesn't mean that you don't have pagans who use Halloween in order to, conduct ceremonies to the moon. Or, I mean, I don't know. I'm just kind of throwing it out here, but the whole point is that, like, just because something is serious to one person doesn't mean it has to be to another person. Like, for most people in America, which I guess you could argue this is kind of Bacchic, but they just get drunk and then they hook up with people on Halloween. Like, at the end of the day, is that worshiping Satan? Is that, summoning evil spirits? I mean, maybe if you believe you are, but at the end of the day, it's kind of like,
I see a certain amount of echoing of worshiping Pan kind of there with all of that with Halloween. Getting up in costumes, going out, getting drunk,
oh yeah,
running around.
Trick or treat, the whole idea of fear or panic.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, I was going to say, my take is if somebody wants to be scared that God's going to smite them for doing something, that's their right to be scared of it. It's when they expect me not to do what they're scared of because I should be scared that God's going to smite me that I draw the line.
Yeah, it's like all of a sudden when you're saying, oh, you better not do that, God's going to smite you, it's kind of like, I think it's you who wants to smite me.
I always think, don't step on a crack, break your mother's back.
But yeah, I mean, what was it Roosevelt said? Which, I mean, personally, Roosevelt was a terrible guy. I mean, he knew what was happening during the Holocaust, and he like literally could care less what happened to the Jews. So just
You're
saying that.
you're being disrespectful to the disabled there, Ariel.
I'm disabled.
So was Roosevelt.
Yeah, I know. So how am I being disrespectful to the disabled? That's like calling a Jew anti-Semitic.
Well, some of them are. I've heard some Jews say some
Okay,
awful
well,
things about it.
yeah, but you know what I mean. It's like it's like it's ironic, but no, like I
Well,
mean,
I was going to say the other one is the argument of Jews are allowed to be anti-Semitic because they're part of the tribe. Just like it's again, once you're within a group, you get to own those hateful words.
yeah,
I learned that from the black community. I
yeah,
had it explained to me.
but there's a difference between like making a joke that would be anti-Semitic if anyone else said it versus like literally. I mean, I know of there's historical people, and I know of people in my own life who are relatively anti-Semitic, and like I don't mean like, oh, they just say or joke, like straight up people who believe like horrible things about the Jewish people. And like at the end of the day, just because someone is Jewish doesn't mean that they can't be. But what I'm saying is to obviously I know you were joking about the whole thing with FDR, but like he was objectively a horrible person.
Oh no, I agree with you. Most people who get to be presidents, pretty much other than Jimmy Carter for the most part, are horrible people.
I know
No,
people who think he was horrible.
what's that?
I know people who think he was horrible.
A horrible person? A horrible president, absolutely. But I don't know. How do you think Carter's a horrible person?
I don't know. Maybe they were talking about president.
Yeah, no. He's absolutely. I was gonna say it's part of it is sort of Jewish jokes. It's like, is it anti-Semitic to go? What's the famous Jewish wine? I want to go to Miami. Or a Jewish dilemma, free ham.
Yeah.
It's.
But like, see, the thing with that is it's like it's more so fun of Jewish culture than it is making fun of Jews themselves.
I see the difference. It's more of a poking fun at as opposed to demeaning.
Yeah. Anyway, here, let's continue with this because I want to get through a bit more stuff.
Janus, the god of beginnings and endings, doorkeeper of the
Muted.
Amethyst says, I grew up visiting Hindus and Buddhist teachers and friends' houses during the religious festivals because it's also public/school holidays. They also do the same during Eid. Yeah, that's really special. I wish that there was more of that type of I mean, like you definitely have that type of interaction with more of the reform and conservative elements of the Jewish community. But once you get into like Orthodox and the people who are like truly, I'm not going to say truly religious, but like the ones who are like really religious, there tends to be a bit less interfaith engagement. And I think you'll find this the more religious you get with any tradition, just because there's this inherent, like, it's like, we need to focus on our people, like, and, not in a racist way, but it's just this idea, well, given there's certain traditions where there's this idea of going out and trying to bring people in. You don't have that with Judaism. And so that's why there, so maybe, I guess in that way, maybe there is that difference that, that the more religious you are in other traditions, the more comfortable you are talking about your faith with other people. Whereas with Judaism, it's only really the people who do outreach, like, to other Jews, and in like, so for instance, with the Chabad organization community, which, I mean, they do a lot of good. I disagree with some of the theology, but at the end of the day, it's not because of like them. It's literally just because of my I have some opinions on Judaism that kind of are more First Temple period, but I they do a lot of good. But with Chabad, they basically try and do outreach to Jews, mainly Jews who are, kind of not engaged with their own Jewish identity. And so inevitably, they'll be going around cities and they'll ask, hey, are you Jewish? And, inevitably it makes people uncomfortable, probably most especially Jews. But I mean, at a certain point, especially if they're very clearly Jewish, it's less uncomfortable. It might just be more uncomfortable from the sense of, oh, I don't really want to be, I don't want to be talked to about religion right now, as opposed to, oh, is this person an anti-Semite? But with that, I think that inevitably you have people who aren't Jewish who say, no, I'm not Jewish. And so they ask, well, what is this? And so they do explain. And so in this element, you have this, this, like, I guess you could call it an interfaith, or maybe not even an interfaith, but like a discussion with someone who's not of the Jewish faith, because they could just be of no faith, and they got to learn a bit more. But like, that's not, you don't have like concerted outreach as a thing within Judaism to people who aren't Jews. And that's just because of this idea that, converting people to Judaism is not a goal of Judaism. Inevitably, you're going to have Jews who are out there who want to, start their own little group or whatever. And they're like, oh, here, I'll teach you Judaism, and, you don't have to convert or whatever. But at the end of the day, like, true Judaism does not try and convert people. Like, which I guess this also kind of is the whole thing with Christianity. Like, when they start, trying to bring in people who, which I don't think there's anything wrong with bringing the message to, to the other nations. It's just when you have this idea that becomes a replacement for the Israelites, then you get a lot of problematic stuff. But
so what you're saying is those people aren't going around going up to people and asking, are you Jewish? And if they hear no, the response is, well, do you want to be? I can help.
No, you're never going to hear that from someone in the Chabad movement. Never.
I was going to say that's much more of the Christian Muslim sort of approach.
Yeah,
No, and I was going to say, I grew up in, again, much like Amethyst there, where it was a very multicultural, where it was probably about almost half Jewish, 40%, something like that in the area. Again, they had a Chinese restaurant that was kosher. And you need to have a fair amount of established Jewish base to support, kosher restaurants of, non-Jewish ethnicities.
Yeah. And I mean, at a certain point, though, it's actually, if you think about it, I mean, I guess it all depends. You have to have enough people who are actually going to go specifically for that in order to make it a worthy business opportunity. But theoretically, I mean, if you want to open a restaurant in a majority Muslim or majority Jewish area, it's kind of just smart to make it kosher, because, well, for certain, if it's kosher, it's also halal. But more than that, I mean, there's always going to be a market for kosher food, because unless you're in the middle of nowhere and there's no Jews, then of course there's not going to be a market. But yeah, Amethyst said, haha, yeah, same here, halal Chinese restaurant. And then they also said, I think that's why Judaism seems more mysterious to outsiders like us. I definitely can see that. It's kind of interesting, because I even have this, like, it even feels that way to me in a sense. Like, and I think at least part of that is because I didn't grow up actually understanding Hebrew inherently. I knew some Hebrew words, but it wasn't like I could actually understand it fluently. And so for me, of course, there's a lot of English resources, but in terms of like really getting the truth of what's in the religion, you have to read the original language, and you're just not going to get that from translations. And so with that, I think that maybe there's that difference, because you also have this idea that certain things are, I don't know, given I also I don't know a whole lot about Christian or Muslims study. So like how people study in those traditions. And so I don't really want to speak and, misspeak. But anyway, let's continue with this, unless you have any thoughts.
The only thing I would add is some of that mystery has to do with the oral tradition that's been passed down, because there's always going to be an oral tradition that has a certain amount of mystery to it.
Definitely. And most of it isn't properly or maybe not properly translated, but most of it just isn't translated because there's so much. And you know, at the end of the day, some of it's translated, but translated into English. So that's another story, because you know it's really only within the past 100 years that a significant amount of Jews have really lived in like in English speaking countries, if that makes any sense. Because England was like, there were very few Jews in England up until the 18th century. And in America, you started having a lot of Jews flooding in there as a result of the Spanish Inquisition. And that, but really, that it's like much more hidden and much more like on the, well, also it's Spanish primarily, Spanish and Portuguese, and so
Don't forget Dutch in New York. There were a lot of Dutch Jews that came over to New York.
really,
I'm pretty sure.
Well, keep in mind though, those Dutch Jews were also Sephardic, and so so a lot of them they were still speaking Spanish and Ladino. I mean, they definitely knew Dutch, but I guess my point being is, yeah, you have a relatively, I don't know the specific number, but really it's not really until the 1900s that you have a massive wave of immigration from Eastern Europe as a result of the pogroms that were happening in Russia. And so that's really when you start to have a lot of Jews in English-speaking countries, because from there you have America, you have Canada, you also have England, South Africa, Australia, all the Commonwealth countries. And so it's only really within the past 100 years that you have a need for these translations into English in the first place. Because before then, the communities were still so insular that they still knew Hebrew well enough, Hebrew and Aramaic well enough to study these things. But eventually, as you have this assimilation, because you have more Jews, and so there's this idea that you don't have to stay within your, well, also you have an increased acceptance of Jews, and so you have a decrease in Jewish knowledge.
I need you to correlate my best fit here, Ariel,
Yeah.
because some of what you were saying there runs a little bit counter, not much, because I would push the date back to the major translation trend to about the mid 1800s, where we're closing on close to 200 years. And by my knowledge, there was a big resurgence of Hebrew at that point, especially in the Ashkenazi, the more Germanic Jewish communities, because up until that point, a lot of the knowledge of Hebrew had been lost among more of the general populace in the Jewish. It was still kept in the rabbis and the scholars, but there was a big return to getting it, and that was where translations of Hebrew to German and Hebrew to English really started, was to get the Jewish communities that were more secularizing to their local areas to be able to reconnect with their traditions. How far off is my understanding there?
So this is like the late 1800s, but it's into German, not into English. English only really happens after you have these massive waves of immigration, largely after the Russians. It's tricky because you have a lot of people speaking Yiddish, but they still like, because the thing is, you have to keep in mind that people are reading. They're still using Hebrew, the stuff that here. Sorry, let me focus on the main thing. So basically, most of the so you don't have this need for translation really until you have this increased assimilation into European society that happens as a result of Napoleon's emancipation of the Jews. And so with this, you have an increased assimilation, more speaking of French, of German, of Russian, and less use of Yiddish, only really amongst the religious communities that stay around. And so that's where the Reform community starts, within Germany, and then it gets imported to the U.S. by German immigrants in the late 1800s, before World War I. And then it's really with World War I that you have an increase in Jewish immigrants from Russia, and then they're needing to learn English as well. And so you basically have German immigrants, Russian immigrants, Polish immigrants, Jews from all over Europe. It's not in the same massive scales as you'll have until the lead up to World War II and right after. But with that, they're basically deciding, well, we could continue to read our translations, like if they're reformed, in German, or it tended to be that the Russians were a bit more religious. But the point is, once you start to have this melding of different communities together, they just start translating it into English. And this is really where you have like a massive push towards that. And then obviously in England as well. But really, there's not much of a need until you have these massive waves of immigration. And you have to keep in mind that there really are no English-speaking Jews until you have Jews that are migrating to English-speaking countries. So, like you brought up the Dutch. They didn't speak English. They spoke Dutch. Eventually, they end up speaking English because, England takes over. But it's kind of like, you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah, no, you're basically saying what I said wasn't inherently incorrect. There was a lot more context. I definitely didn't have the piece about the Napoleon liberating the Jewish religion there. That one was key that I didn't have in my fit.
Yeah, prior to that, Jewish communities are so insular that there's really no need for them to speak other languages unless they're, say, merchants, or they're like working for but that's the thing, like really the only Jews who were working for non-Jews would have been like the court Jews, or like the court Jews, or the court rabbis, basically the people who were answering directly to the king. And I mean, for all intents and purposes, they were owned by the king of wherever they lived. It's the whole idea of a serf Kamarai, like servant of the king. It's really wild. But so that's the reason why Jews in some lands were forced into money lending, is because they were basically property of the king. Any response to that, or?
Oh, I was just going to add, not only that, but they were banned from the trades and owning land and every other activity a Christian could do. So the only thing left was the things that were banned from Christians, which again was money lending, because usury, any sort of interest you charged people, was inherently a sin. So there was no point in ever lending money if you were a Christian.
But yeah, I mean, it's definitely like it needs to be stated that in the same way that once you have Jews able to, do, for lack of a better term, any job that a non-Jew can do, as a result of Napoleon, that's the same time that you have this switching of, well, only a specialized trade or only a specialized class knows these other languages, to all of a sudden only the specialized class knows Hebrew. And so that, I mean, it's interesting. This is one of the reasons why some religious Jews like really, really don't like secularism, because they think that it's destructive to Jewish identity. I personally don't. I just think that it tends to be that the way that most people engage with secular culture is at the expense of their own Jewish identity. But it's not to say that it's inherent.
Now, just to bring this full circle here, I'm hearing a lot of echoes about the complaints during the Second Temple period about Hellenizing, and that being the secularizing in the day, versus what we're talking about now happening in Germany after Napoleon lifted the barriers. Or all of a sudden, you had the people going that way, and that secularization being at the problem. So I'm definitely seeing a lot of parallels there. Tag to you on that.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's kind of one of the things. It's like this idea of, well, if secularism means that people have this freedom not to practice Judaism, does it also mean that the people who choose to practice Judaism are practicing it that much more? And I think the answer is yes. It's the same idea that you see within Christianity, that he who is without sin created sin so that we could be righteous in him. There's this idea that we could have been created as righteous as the angels, but then would we actually be righteous? Because that's the thing, the angels aren't righteous. They can't be. They're just holy.
Right.
So,
They don't have free will.
yeah, and I think that's something that a lot of people take for granted. They see angels as holy and righteous, but no, literally, they're holy. They can be merciful. They can be chesed, but they can't be righteous. They can't be tzaddik. And I mean, actually, I might be wrong on this, so I feel free to correct me if I'm wrong and tell me why. And I'd be gladly. I'd love to learn. But basically, there's this idea that because they don't have free will, that they can't choose to do good, and I mean, therefore, they also can't choose to do evil. Which, in some ways, you could view as, and there's even this idea that angels and demons can be commanded by humans, not just within this like literal sense, but within this idea of what is it? Shoot, where was I going with this?
I was going to say Solomon thought it was kind of literal from what I remember.
Well, yeah, but he had special powers. I'm just talking about this idea of like if angels don't have any ability to choose to do good or evil, they just do. So obviously there's this idea that there's like the angels that God commands, but then there's like this idea of the angels that we have, like not that we command, but it's like the way we act impacts the way they act. It's like there's a not, and again, I wouldn't view this within a literal sense, but it's more so like, when you do something bad, it creates this like bad energy. I mean, like, if you piss someone off, like, if you say F you to someone, like that doesn't just disappear, that affects them. And, it might affect each person differently, but like it has that impact. And at the end of the day, do the words F you actually are those words what are hurting you? Or like, I mean, technically they're hurting you, but do they mean to hurt you? They're literally just words. The thing is, the person who's using them is the one who's directing it. And so it's kind of this idea of like, I mean, given, not to say that we literally command angels and demons. That's not what I'm saying. It is a parallel on a smaller scale to this idea of demons aren't actually evil. They're just being commanded by God to do what we perceive as evil, as bad, in order to create this dichotomy that allows there to be angels that do the good. And so, it's kind of this idea that just as there's, you could view like angels associated with the rain, and given that's still seen as probably a bit heretical. There's this idea that God brings the rain. But like, for lack of a better term, let's just say that that's the case. If you're to say that angels bring the rain, you could view as, well, demons bring drought, and God's commanding all of them. So, I mean, in that case, you're still viewing it as God's behind it. But basically, there's this idea that, it talks about in Isaiah that Yotzer or Uberei Choshech, for the former of light and the creator of darkness, was it Osei Shalom, the maker of peace, the Borei Ra, and the creator of evil. Ani Adonai Osei Kol Eila. I am the Lord. I do all of these things. And it's saying that God is, but how do you have all these things if God is good? Well, it's this idea that, and I mean, I guess this is kind of a thought experiment. If God is all good, but he's capable of doing evil, does that also mean that he could be all evil and capable of doing good? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, and now you're dealing with that whole antinomic inversion here, where everything done for evil ultimately is done it gets turned for the good of God. And and now you're going with the idea of where I had to resolve it with two basically different ideas of God, where you have one that's the source, infinity, beyond the Tao, beyond all sorts of conception or any sorts of words. And then you have a creator that basically uses that energy emanation while to shape it with intelligence and will and such. And that's more downstream. And it's like and that's where you have the old trilemma where, omnipotence, omniscience, and omnibenevolence, you can only have 2 out of the 3. Because as soon as you have 2 of them, you can basically disprove the third from a metaphysical standpoint.
You also have clear parallels to the idea of Janus and, the beginning and the end, and like in some ways the beginning, the creation, and the end, the destruction.
Yeah, no, and that's the Janus. And when you're talking again with the demons and all, 2 of the things that stuck in there. The first one was the idea that if angels and demons don't have free will, how can they have a fall?
Well, see, that's the thing. What does it mean by fall?
I know exactly what you mean, and that's where the pluriform interpretation comes in. But the traditional one about the rebellion sort of concept, you can't rebel if you don't have free will.
So I guess the implication in that is almost that, is that saying that God sent them down to do that? It's like it's interesting.
Yeah, and the other one is the idea of the summoning. And that's if people are familiar with, the whole Godic summoning with, the Keys of Solomon, the idea there is that those demons are more psychological elements that you're bringing under your own control with the names.
So it's like almost in some ways you could view that our emotions in a certain way are, and given, I'm not implying directly, but in a way, our emotions are to us as angels and demons are to God. We like, and here's the inversion: we're not capable of truly controlling our feelings, but God is able of controlling angels and demons.
No, you're definitely onto something. That's a lot of the general ideas that I can agree with. Yeah, I get that sense.
So Amethyst says, yeah, we believe jinns can follow religions of the community where they're residing. Some can be Muslims, Christians, or simply God believers, but some follow Satan, and we call them demons. Interesting. We also believe Solomon, peace be upon him, can command jinn among other things, and he's the only human who was granted that miracle. I wonder if it has anything to do with the wisdom by God.
Could be. I was going to say a lot of that tradition ties into the whole Tyrian connection and the whole builder mason sort of angle. That's all rolled up into that sort of complex, which is a whole bundle of worms for a different day.
Definitely, yeah. So let's see. Let's continue with this.
The heavens. Janus is a deity found in the religion and myth of ancient Rome. The Romans believed that Janus was the god of doors, beginnings and endings, and transitions. In accordance to the role he played, Janus is depicted as a two-faced god, Janus Bifrons.
Technically, so, I mean, it's kind of implicit, but technically so is the God of the Bible. Because there's this idea that Moses spoke to God face to face, but he spoke to his backside. It's not saying he spoke to his butt, it's saying he spoke to his other face.
Oh, come on. The images of God mooning Moses is kind of entertaining.
Yeah, but it's like it covers up so much more interesting stuff.
The other one I'm picking up here, similar to what we were talking about before, is the ideas that a natural consort for Janus would be chaos, where Janus is facing that those decisions onto the unformed chaos, and that being the transition sort of concept. I don't know if there's any connection there, but it seems like that would be a natural one.
Maybe it's almost like the order is the past and the chaos is the future.
Well, yeah, the present emerges from the chaos based off of our choices.
Yeah, and it's like that which has happened has been ordered.
Exactly, and that's been, it's been decided one way or the other with Janus.
Janus two-faced, one looking to the future and the other looking to the past. Occasionally, Janus was depicted as having four faces, in a form known as Janus quadrifrons, Janus four-faced.
Whoa.
The first month of the year, January.
That almost seems like it's a reference to the Four Seasons.
Well, you have the four seasons, you have the four, four directions, four, four gospels, four gospel writers.
Oh, it's so funny. I forget. What is it? Was it my teacher referenced this in class today? Was it? The song "Turn, Turn, Turn."
Yeah, the birds.
Wait, that's by the Birds.
Yeah,
Wait,
BYRDS.
wait. What are the lyrics you're thinking of?
It's one from Ecclesiastes. To everything, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn.
Yeah. So this says is a song written by Pete Seeger in 1959. The lyrics, except for the title, which is repeated throughout the song, and the final two lines consist of the first 8 verses of the 3rd chapter of the biblical book. Wow. So that's why it resonates so much. Oh, that's why he brought it up. I'm so. We were literally talking about Hellenistic Judaism today. That's why he brought it up. So yeah.
I know that was a song, a Vietnam, basically Vietnam protest song that was popular when I was in kindergarten, 69.
Oh wow.
68, 69.
But yeah, you're right.
I'm old. Remember, Ariel, I'm old.
You're right though. It's the Birds. I just didn't show it on where I was looking for, but yeah. So the lyrics are taken almost verbatim from the Book of Ecclesiastes, as found in the King James Version, 1611 of the Bible. Though the sequence of the words was rearranged, for the song, Ecclesiastes is traditionally ascribed to King Solomon, who would have written it in the 10th century BC, but believed by a significant group of biblical scholars to date much later, up to the 3rd century BCE, during Hellenism. So, to every season, to everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the. I only know the chorus. To everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heaven. A time to be born, a time to be born, and a time to die. A time to plant, a time to reap. Wait, what? Oh no, that's a different song. A time to reap that which is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. Are those seriously the lyrics to the song?
Yes.
How did... I guess everyone just remembers the chorus.
No, it's literally almost word for word the verse. Yeah.
Interesting, but yeah, where's actually have the lyrics? The chorus. It's to every season there's. Yeah, it doesn't. Does it have the chorus here? Weird renditions, maybe. Oh, the Birds version is probably the one that has it because they have to make it more, unless. Shoot, I'm not able to find it. Anyway. Yeah, and I'd play it, but I'm not trying to get a copyright strike. So anyway, let's continue. But yeah, like just this idea of, the turning. I mean, also don't really want to get into that, but I mean, it's even connected to the whole idea of the swastika, that it literally just represents the turning of the stars.
Well, that was not a bad symbol for thousands of years.
Oh yeah, I know. I just don't want to get into it because it's a tangent.
Understood. I think we can close it with that.
Was named as such in honor of this god. Who is Janus? Janus is an ancient god whose worship dates all the way back to the time of Romulus and even before the founding of Rome. Unlike many of the deities worshipped by the Romans, Janus does not have a Greek counterpart or equivalent. According to one myth, Janus was the first king of Latium, and is credited with bringing civil and social order to mankind. In doing so, he brought humanity from barbarity to civilization, and this transition from one state of being
So that's why he's called that's why he's called like King of the Kittim. So they're taking this from the idea that Janus was once a king of Latium.
Yeah, no, and that ties into what you were reading earlier, where he was the son, where from the I forget if it was Midrash, but where he was the son of with Catan.
Yeah, wait, did it say he was the son of Kittim or the king? I think it said he was the king of Kittim and he was the son of.
He was the king. You're right. Yeah, king of Kittim.
I think he was
the
the
Kittim
son of,
person. He was the son of.
I think
ahead.
Agrius or something. Might be wrong, but we could always look.
Yeah, it was sort of like, I want to say his son was Latium or the father, but that fit into there, where that was part of their genealogy, was Latium.
Okay, here I still have it pulled up. So here it's saying let's see, Janus. Janus is one of the people of Kittim. Agnias, the king of Africa, died, and also the death of Janus occurred. Let's see. Now, after this, Herod, the king of Chalcis, died. Wait, what? So it's saying that Herod was originally not a Jewish name. Interesting.
No,
Wait.
he's from Nabatea.
Yeah, but wait, where's Chalcis?
Chalcis, I want to say, is that Black Sea?
Oh, you might. No, that's Colchis.
Oh, you're right. Okay.
So let me see if I can find this. Okay, let's see. So in Jambres. Wait, so it's saying Pharaoh sent for Balaam, the magician, and for Janus and Jambres, his sons. Is this is Sefer HaYashar? It's a different thing, but it's trying to. It seems like it's almost saying that Janus and Jambres are the sons of Balaam.
Yes, they're definitely saying that.
Let's see.
And that's what I'm looking at. That interpreting that as very much a Bronze Sea collapse, sea people sort of thing.
Okay, so here I found it. After the death of Hadad, the Edomites installed Samlah of Masrekah as their king, and he reigned 18 years. And it was his desire to take up the cause of Agnias, not Agrias. Agnias, the old ally of the Edomites, and chastised Zepho for having gone to war with him. But his people, the Edomites, would not permit him to undertake aught that was not good for their kinsmen. And Samlah had abandoned the plan. In the 14th year of Samlah's reign, Zepho died, having been king of. So here it's saying Zepho is the king of Kittim, and he is replaced by Janus.
And Kittim we're tracing to basically Cyprus / the Greek islands up there.
Yeah.
And I found another potential connection here. And that is, there's a town called Kalki. Right, it's an ancient town right outside of Pisa in Italy.
Oh, wow. Listen to this. Beware the underscore said Janus and Ganesh, or Ganesh. I'm saying it purposely for that reason. So Janus and Ganesh, or Janus and, or was it Janus and Ganesh? Like, you definitely can see the connection. Are gods of transition.
To Hindu, yeah.
Yeah. Are gods of transitions and boundaries. Ganesh, or Ganesha, also has two heads. The first head is cut off, and he receives the head of an elephant. They transcend duality. Interesting. And notice this. His head is cut off. Who else's head is cut off? Kaibali. She's castrated.
Interesting. I'm also what I immediately thought was Medusa.
Oh, interesting. But yeah, think about it. So Kaibali is understood as being like a hermaphroditic god. She has both sex organs, but then I forget who it is that that castrates her, but basically turns her into only a woman, and then in the process, you you have this almost like an inversion of Ganesha, who one of his heads gets cut off and he basically becomes an elephant, or
Yeah.
I don't know if he becomes it or exactly what, but yeah, let's continue.
To another is represented by Janus' two faces. According to Roman mythology, Janus was the husband of Camicine, a nymph, and the two had a son, Tiburonus. It was from Tiburonus that the river Tiber gained its name. Prior to that, the river was known as Albula. Following Tiberinus's death in the river or on its banks, however, its name was changed. In another myth about Janus, Saturn, after being exiled by Jupiter from the heavens,
And this is also connected to the idea of the pontifex, from where we get the idea of the Pope. Because the pontifex, you know what pontifex means?
Yeah, it's the chief bridge builder.
Yeah.
Or bridge inspector, or
or alternatively, bridge guardian.
I was going to say that's part of one of the things that I like to point out is all of the Roman emperors, including Julius Caesar, was the Pontifex Maximus.
Interesting. Yeah, because it wasn't like that there was only one. It was just it was a role.
Like no, there was only one.
No. Oh, sorry. I meant there wasn't only one pontifex. Sorry, I misspoke.
Oh yeah, no. That the Pontifex Maximus. It was part of the whole Roman religious structure. It was, I want to say, the third or fourth ranking in the religious structure, but Julius Caesar bankrupted himself in order to get the title of Pontifex Maximus, and he probably wouldn't have been able to do the stuff he did if he had not had that title.
So in other words, he was the Elon Musk of ancient Rome.
Oh, absolutely. Only had a little more substance than Elon.
Hey, that's so true.
Arrives in Janiculum, the city founded by Janus, on a ship.
Wait, what?
The god was received the city.
That sounds like some horrible condition you get on your private parts.
After being exiled by Jupiter from the heavens, arrives in Janiculum, the city founded by Janus, on a ship. The god was received warmly by Janus and in return for his hospitality bestowed on the king the power to see both into the future and into the past. Why was Janus such an important god to the Romans? The Romans regarded Janus as an important god, which is evident in one of his titles, Divam Deus, which means the god's god. Before a sacrifice could be made to any of the other deities, Janus would first be invoked and a libation be poured for him. The rationale for this is that
this sounds it almost sounds like they were henotheistically worshipping Janus and that all the other gods were secondary.
The other one that I'm sitting there when they said the god of gods was Abraxas, god above gods. I'm curious if there are connections, parallels between the two.
So it's interesting. So god of gods would be like, okay, so it would be like El Ha'elim, but the equivalent to the god above gods would be El Elohe Ha-Elohim. It would be a direct parallel to the Melech Malkei Hamlachim, the king of kings, or basically it's like you have three uses of it. So it's saying the king of kings, but it's the king of kings. So would that track? So would the god of gods be the god above God, or god above gods?
Could be. We're dealing in territories that's tough to tell. We're very abstract.
Basically theurgy.
It's like there's so little known about Abraxas, and a lot more known about Janus. It's like I want to say so much about Abraxas is stuff that Jung wrote 100 years ago.
I mean, it's interesting. We have this way of drawing down history in a way that we only have drops, but we turn it into a lake.
You got to do what you got to do when you need the water.
It's true. Water is life. It's also wisdom. But also, drink bad water, drink too much water, and you're going to keel over and die. Yeah, that was dark, but I mean, it's also true. There was actually a woman who she was doing some radio contest on the radio, obviously, and it was like you had to drink a certain amount of water. She won. She also died, so she lost. And I mean, maybe this sounds like I'm being crass, but like honestly, I hope the people who put that show on were like charged or something. But I mean, it is sad, but it shows that even too much of a good thing is bad.
A Pyrrhic victory.
The only thing with Pyrrhic is it sounds too similar to like Pyrrhos, as in like fire. Maybe more of like a thalassic victory. I feel horrible. I'm sorry. We're talking about a woman who died. I'm sorry. It's not funny. It'd be one thing if we're talking about someone who deserved it, but she was literally just trying to win money, and we live in a society where money is, so important because people can't live without it. And I don't mean like happiness. I'm literally talking about you can't survive without money in this society. So at the end of the day, shouldn't be making fun of her. And,
well,
yeah.
I know where you're going with that one, but what pops into my head is the show Jackass. And those were people who were doing and basically killing themselves, not even for money.
Yeah, but like they knew full well what they were doing, whereas this other lady was just trying to win money. I think there's a difference in the circumstances.
Oh, there's a difference. I'm not sure which one's better or worse. And some of those people on Jackass, I'm not willing to sign off that they knew what they were doing.
Okay, fair, but I mean, like they were involved in it. Where basically, I just don't think that we should make fun of anyone dying, regardless of how.
But sometimes it's hard not. Sometimes it's hard not. Sometimes you gotta laugh at senseless death, though.
I mean, like for instance, like I get making fun of how Gaddafi died. I get that, but like at the end of the day, when you're dealing with someone who they were just trying to win a little bit of money, like anyway, we're getting caught up on something that's not important. But I don't feel the need.
I'll just sum it up with one of my examples, and that was a story that I read when I was in college about this guy who decided he wanted to turn his car into a plane. So he bought like a couple of rockets and put it on the side of his car and welded on some wings, and literally the car took off. And they found the car crashed into a mountain 20 miles away later. And it's just, he got what he wanted. It's a senseless death. And that's all I got to say.
It reminds me of the story of the Chinese emperor with the firework throne.
Yeah, or the whole Darwin Awards are based off of silly people dying silly ways.
Hey, it used to be that if you were rich enough, dying foolishly was a luxury. Now it's just something that you get mocked for doing.
Or views on YouTube.
True.
Go on with Janus.
Since Janus was the doorkeeper to the heavens, it was through him that all the other gods and goddesses may be reached. The association between Janus and doorways is seen in the fact that many yoni were built in Rome. These ceremonial gateways were freestanding structures used for symbolically auspicious entrances or exits. These gateways had a particular
connection, a little bit like a mezuzah, but in a different way.
To Roman armies departing for war, and there were both lucky and unlucky ways to march through a Janus. What is the most famous shrine dedicated to Janus? The most famous Janus in Rome was the Janus Geminus, twin Janus, which was a shrine to Janus located on the north side of the Forum. This was a bronze structure with double doors on each end, with the cult statue in between them. According to tradition, the doors of the shrine would be left open during times of war and conversely closed during times of peace. According to the writer Plutarch, It was the legendary King Numa, the successor of Romulus, who initiated this tradition, and during his reign the doors had always been closed, signifying that his rule had been a peaceful one. On the other hand, the poet Virgil states that the closing of the doors were meant to
Are
keep
you
war
thinking what
in.
I'm thinking? You have a king who rules and has a bloody reign, and then his son has a peaceful reign, which is notable.
No, you're saying David Solomon, and that kind of fits this parallel too, because the whole Roman royal lineage falls apart after the second king here, Numa.
Interesting. Numa Numa A.
Yeah.
More like Numa Numa Yay. I mean Numa Numa Nay.
Shamalama Ding Dong.
I don't have a response to that. I was going to say something, but then I realized it would be better just not to say anything. Not because it was bad, but because it was cringy.
The closing of the doors of the Janus Geminus was a powerful symbol and was exploited by the Roman emperors. Augustus, for instance, boasted that the doors were shut 3 times during his reign. The doors of the shrine were also shut during the reigns of Nero. In 66 AD, following the victory over the Parthians and Vespasian, in 75 AD, following the conquest of Jerusalem, coins were minted to commemorate the occasion. While the Janus Geminus was the most important shrine to Janus, there were also other temples built in his honor. One of them, for instance, was erected on the Janiculum, while another was built at the Forum Holatorium, vegetable market, by the consul Marcus Duilius to commemorate his naval victory over the Carthaginians at the Battle of Mylae in 260 BC. The most obvious
That's
legacy of
interesting
Janus in modern
that he's being connected with the Carthaginian War. That's fascinating.
Especially with all the other Carthaginian connections we found already.
Yeah, like they're it real like honestly one of the things I've discovered by studying this stuff, and I think this is one of the reasons why religious people, or like why monotheists should not be afraid of studying paganism. I don't mean like worshiping pagan gods. I literally just mean studying it. Is because literally what you'll realize is that these people who were worshipping these gods in the ancient world, most of them started off as real people, or at least as people who are claimed to be real. This isn't just merely saying that these are gods, and they literally are. The ideas, you could understand, is the ideas pre-exist them, but then these people are deified into those ideas. Like the idea of Janus is how can Janus be present at the beginning of all time if Janus is also this human person? And the answer is, I mean, basically, at least the way I look at it, is the idea of Janus, you could view it as being, even if it didn't develop within the minds of humans at that time, in that context, you could definitely view it as Janus, like the true Janus is actually God, in the same way that the true Dionysus is actually God, in the same way that the true Zeus is actually God. Like basically, this is the way that that Christians or Jews, probably not Muslims, because of the idea that the pagan gods are evil, or that they're not real, or I don't know exactly what the perspective would be, but you definitely have this clear distinction. Whereas I mean, you definitely see in Christianity how all these things that seem similar to Jesus, they're actually just leading up to Jesus. And so I think in that context, that's probably literally what Christianity did to Jesus is what these other pagan, what these pagan traditions did to their gods. And the thing is that the true God of Christianity isn't Jesus. It's God and the Holy Spirit, or it's like God the Father and God the Holy Spirit. But Jesus isn't a God, only within the sense of being literally deified as a man. But that's no different than a lot of these pagan gods. And again, I'm not saying that means that you're wrong for worshiping Jesus if you're a Christian. It just means that like the form of Christianity you follow is, further evolved than the form that was present during the crucifixion, if you could even call that Christianity.
No, I was going to say, I think virtually every form of Christianity today is more evolved than what happened, in anything in the first century there. But no, you're hitting on a lot of good points there, Ariel. I'm trying to think of which ones in particular at the moment. Because you're hitting on some of what I'm talking about my pluriform multi-level interpretation, where you can have Janus as an abstract concept. You can have him as basically more of an archetypal god in the sense that we've been talking about. You can have him as, like, again, a tribe of people moving around. You can have him as like an individual king, an individual person as well. And it's like each one of those could be an appropriate interpretation at some point in time, or it might not be. And that's sort of the where I'm working for with my pluriform interpretation at the moment. I'll tag back to you and see what you think.
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of agree with what you said. So, yeah.
Eastern culture as the month January, which was named in his honor. In addition, the English word janitor is derived from the Latin ianitor, meaning doorkeeper or porter, and is a reference to this Roman god.
Wow.
That's it
I
for
didn't know
today's
that.
video.
That's fascinating. That Yanator is from Janos.
And Porter almost combined Janus and Mercury with the traveler sort of concept.
Oh, yeah. Wow. It's just so fascinating. Let's see. What's this?
Have you ever wondered why we celebrate New Year on January 1st? Well, it wasn't always so. There's been a lot of toing and froing over the past 2,000 years before this date was consolidated. Welcome to Intrigued Mind, where today we will go back in time to discover why January 1st is the day that we celebrate the coming of a brand new year. The earliest recorded celebrations of New Year's were made by the Babylonians in around 2000 BCE. These ancient people held a festival that went on for several days in honor of the rebirth of the natural world. They called it Ekitu, and it took place at the beginning of spring. By the time of Rome's legendary founder, Romulus, the Romans had developed their own calendar based on the phases of the moon. It is believed that the Romans developed their lunar calendar using knowledge that came to them from the Babylonians and the Greeks. However, this 305-day-long calendar, which was based on the 10-month-long phases of the moon, did not match with the solar year, which at 365 days ran closer to 12 months. At this point in time, the Romans celebrated New Year during the vernal equinox, which is one of the 2 days each year when day and night are of the same length and generally falls around March 20th in the northern hemisphere. Enter Numa Pompilius, who according to legend reigned from 715 to 673 BCE as the second king of Rome after Romulus. It is Numa Pompilius who is credited with the establishment of a fixed calendar. This calendar used calends, which was the first day of the month, and is where we get the word calendar from. Nonus, which was the 9th day before the Ides of each month, and Ides, which was the day that fell roughly in the middle of each month. The leftover months that had not previously been accounted for in the old calendar were simply known as winter, and the calendar year commenced in March, which coincided with the start of spring. Numa Pompilius added 2 extra months.
Yeah, so winter. It also has to do with the whole. You see it reflected in the Revolutionary War. This idea of winter quarters. You quarter during the winter, and then March is the start of the campaign season, and it has to do with the fact that March is from Mars, the god of war.
No, it definitely makes sense. And it sounds like what they were doing is saying that basically as a society, they only would plan things up until the harvest season. And once winter sets in, basically everybody, it's hands off until spring starts. And we just, basically survive.
Also, correct me if this wasn't Neil and this was you that I was talking about this with, about the idea that basically we're inverted in when we have children, like how a lot of kids are born like during the winter, whereas it used to be most kids were born during the spring. Was it you or Neil?
That was Neil.
Okay. Well, here, I'll tell you more once I finish this tab.
so that the length of the calendar now matched the length of a solar year. The first month was named Janus, after the Roman god of time, transitions, beginnings, and endings. The second month was named Februarius, in reference to the purification ritual that
The Februalis, which is even connected with this idea of like basically the idea of being struck by Cupid's arrow probably has to do with this idea, or either it gets kind of adapted or is connected with this idea of being struck with the februa, which are basically goat skin strips that the febru was it the I forget what the priests are called, the flamen februalis, the priests of the februalis, that they run around and strike people with it, and it's supposed to grant fertility.
the Romans undertook on the 15th of February each year. Thus,
And notice
the
that
calend was
the 15th of February. That's literally a day after Valentine's Day.
Yep.
first day of January, which was the first month. So it made sense that the first day of the new year was on January 1st. This concept, which was loosely adhered to in Rome, was consolidated in the year 153 BCE, when January 1st was chosen as the day on which the new consuls of Rome were inaugurated. This was during the years of the Roman Republic, when the position of consul was the highest-ranking political office in Rome. So it was an important day for the Romans. By the time 46 BCE rolled around, there was a new sheriff in town, so to speak. Just don't mention the Ides of March. And Julius Caesar was the head of the Roman Empire. Caesar worked with Greek mathematicians to fix an error in the calendar. There were too many leap years, so these were reduced to one every 4 years to use up the leftover time from the 365 days that made up 1 year, which was 0.25 days. After this amendment, it took 455 days to get things back on track, but they got there in the end. January 1st was still considered the new year, and with the expansion of the Roman Empire, this custom was adopted throughout Caesar's vast lands. Once the Roman Empire collapsed and Christianity took hold throughout Europe from the 4th century CE onwards, the custom of welcoming the beginning of a new year on January 1st was cast aside in favor of a date that was sacred to this new religion, March 25th, the day of the Annunciation, when the Archangel Gabriel appeared before the Virgin Mary to tell her of the Immaculate Conception. Indeed, the liturgical calendar was now the most important calendar to Christians. January 1st was not an important feast day for this religion, so they did not mark the coming of the new year with this date. This liturgical calendar was predominant throughout Europe in the early medieval period in terms of special days, used alongside the Julian calendar to mark the passage of 1 year.
Whoa, so is this basically saying that you have the Roman Empire, the government side, that institutes this idea that January 1st is, and then when it becomes Christian, the Christian calendar circumvents that, and so that's why it only is with Pope Gregory that you have this reestablishment of January 1st as because he's going back to this older Roman way of doing it, rather than trying to create this new Christian way. And in the process, I mean, this probably also has a lot to do with the Renaissance, with the repaganization of Europe through the form of the Renaissance.
The guy doing the video is missing what I consider some very crucial facts. One of them is January 1st is an important feast day in the Catholic Church. It's one of, I think it's like 8 holy days of obligation that you're required to go to church if it's not on Sunday. You know, alongside like Christmas, November 1st, All Saints Day, Immaculate Conception, the Assumption. But again, January 1st is one of those, and it's now called the Octave of Christmas. That's a post-Vatican II from the early 1960s change. But what it traditionally was Feast of the Circumcision.
Interesting.
Where January 1st was when Jesus got circumcised.
But the thing that's really striking about that is that it's clearly it's got to be a post-Roman tradition because of the fact that you have, that's 8 days after the 25th?
Yep.
So, yeah, I mean, because where do we even get this tradition that he was born on the 25th? I think isn't this a result of trying to syncretize the birth of Jesus with Saturnalia?
No, you're definitely right. That's my interpretation of it. I'm just looking at how well that works, where you have the 8 days with Saturnalia to the circumcision, with the January 1st birth, and Feast of the Circumcision being the New Year. Seems like particularly well executed synchronization.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's like one thing to forget something. It's another thing, like if you're clearly leaving something out, because in one case, like I mean, I literally I recently made actually here real quick to just give myself some see where is it and I do just want to show this recent video or
No,
it's
here's my point: is it wasn't that he left it out. He actually went and stated that January 1st was not a significant feast day for Christians.
But see, that's what I'm saying. It literally could just be a statement out of ignorance. Whereas there's cases where you've clearly addressed a case where someone is biasly trying to cover up something.
Right. Which is why I led with he left out those important facts.
Yeah. So
I wasn't accusing him of any bias there. It's just like that those are important facts that kind of changes his narrative some.
Oh yeah, I know. I do want to clarify. That's not what I was saying. I just wanted to restate that.
Gotcha.
So here, I recently, I actually did this today when I was on campus. Here, let me see if there's a way I can zoom in more. I spent probably like an hour, maybe 2 hours working on this. I'd like to think it was worth it. This is probably how I'm going to make some content for a while because it's easy to do, short clips. So here. And so just for context,
Apparently, Chris.
welcome to, I'll talk about it in this, but there's literally a part of the of ASU that's called the that it's literally called the nipple of knowledge. I mean that's what it says on a map if you look at it, like on an online map. Welcome to this. Welcome to the so-called nipple of knowledge. And no, I did not come up with this name. This is the top of the underground section of ASU's Noble Library. It's the largest library on campus and where most of the records and archives are stored. While it might sound strange to call the top of a library the nipple of knowledge, it really isn't that weird in the grand scheme of things. After all, Asherah was depicted in a highly stylized way, as not only a torso, yet with prominent breasts and vulva. It is clear that she is Asherah because she wears the familiar bouffant wig of the Egyptian cow goddess Hathor, who is pictured and named on plaques as Khudsu, the Holy One. As though that were not convincing enough, Hestron went on to cite several Egyptian 2nd millennium BC tomb paintings in which a fully branched tree is shown as a woman, offering a breast with outstretched hand and suckling an infant. This directly parallels the tree of life, which grants blessings of wisdom, understanding, knowledge, and happiness to those who grasp her. Given that we know that Asherah is associated both with breasts and with trees and with knowledge, is it that much of a stretch to assume that she's the one who grants knowledge through her breast? Milk. So, the nipple of knowledge. Well, so what'd you think?
Interesting.
Yeah, it was literally just an impromptu thing because I was like, I'm going to make a video here. Oh, wait, this is called the nipple of knowledge. And then I just kind of connected the two.
The other thing that kind of reminded me of was the pyramid at the Louvre.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. But yeah, probably going to make more short form content like that because it's really easy to edit. And it's also a good way of just kind of getting my hand into it and not getting frustrated.
Oh, it's always good to learn some different skills, try some different things, see what works.
Definitely. So here, let's finish up this one.
Until the year 1582, that the Pope at the time, Pope Gregory VIII, decided that the Julian calendar needed an overhaul.
Look at this. Wait, 1582. Wait. So yeah, this is they were already using cochineal by now. You can see.
Yeah, I want to say, was Gregory the one that brought that in?
I'm not sure, but it would have had to be probably no earlier than 1500 at least. I mean, they were bringing it back, but probably would have taken a few years for it to catch on.
No, it was the red started in the 1200s.
Well, but that not with the cochineal. The cochineal
only
comes around through the Columbian Exchange.
Right.
So So
Yeah.
the red they were using previously was from the granum, from the red grains. Like, I mean, it's bugs, but they called them granum
Gotcha.
because they were more like they looked like little like berries.
Up to this point, the number of leap days in the Julian calendar was still causing problems, especially at Easter time, which was supposed to fall on the Sunday after the first full moon after the vernal equinox. Incidentally, this was the same time that the ancient Babylonians celebrated Akutu, the festival of rebirth. Just as Easter is the time of Jesus' resurrection, Christianity always tried to match their important times of the year with pagan celebrations to make the transition from paganism to Christianity more appealing. But that is a story for another video. Back to Pope Gregory. He had his calendar printed and issued in a papal bull, which meant it was canon law, and therefore had to be adhered to. This papal bull stated that January 1st was once again to be considered the first day of the new year, and it listed all of the feast days in the Christian, now Catholic calendar in order, from January 1st up until December 31st. However, by this point in time, the Catholic Church was not the only Christian superpower in town. Italy, Spain, and Portugal had no problems getting on board with Pope Gregory's new calendar. But Protestant countries shirked the use of the Gregorian calendar, because why should they adhere to something issued by a Catholic pope? So the Protestant countries of Europe, Britain, and the British colonies stuck with the Julian calendar. Incidentally, even today, the Eastern Orthodox Church still uses the Julian calendar. Finally, in the year 1751, the New Style Act calendar was issued in Britain, which declared that New Year's Day would be celebrated on January 1st. This calendar was an act of the British Parliament. Lord Chesterfield was the man behind it, and he had the good sense to see that it was time for Britain and the British Empire to adopt the Gregorian calendar. This calendar was also known as the Chesterfield Act, or the British Calendar Act of 1751. It was declared that this act was for regulating the commencement of the year and for correcting the calendar now in use. The New Style Act calendar changed the start of the legal year from March 25th to January 1st. It kept Christmas Day on December 25th and acknowledged that Easter was a movable feast. In 1753, it was all smooth sailing, and after a few thousand years of argy-bargy, most of the world was finally on the same page. Whew. Now, that's not to say that the whole world celebrates the New Year on January 1st. The Chinese still adhere to a Lunar New Year and celebrate the New Year on the day of the first new moon for that year. Having said that, the Chinese do celebrate January 1st as a national holiday, in keeping with the Western world. So, in effect, they have two New Year celebrations. And in Ethiopia and Eritrea, New Year, known as Enkutatah, is celebrated on the 11th of September. So now that you know why we celebrate New Year on January 1st, thanks to Numa Pompilius, Pope Gregory VIII, and Lord Chesterfield, let's take a look at some wonderful and woeful things that have taken place in the Western world on this most auspicious of dates, other than the beginning of a new year. Number 1. In 404, the last gladiatorial fight took place in Rome. They had been banned by a Christian emperor after a monk was stoned to death by the crowd for trying to stop a gladiatorial fight some years earlier. Number 2. In 1660, English civil servant Samuel Pepys started his diary, which goes on to be the most valuable written record of life in England in the 17th century. Number 3. In 1863, Abraham Lincoln freed 3.5 million enslaved African Americans under the Emancipation Proclamation. Number 4. In 1892, Ellis Island opened, thus paving the way for 12 million immigrants to come to the United States. Number 5. In 1901, all of the colonies and territories of the Great Southern Land formed a federation, making Australia one nation. Number 6. In 1962, 4 young Englishmen went for an audition at Decca Records, but they were passed over for another band, with the label stating that they have no future in show business. These rejects were called the Beatles. Number 7. In 1983, a computer network used by universities and research labs called ARPANET changed its connection protocols, and the internet was born. January 1st is a time of renewed hope in the future, when we wipe the slate clean and start all over again with the best of intentions to have a successful year. So, wherever you are and however you celebrate New Year, let's raise a glass and toast to the fascinating story of why many of us celebrate New Year on January 1st. For more videos on the most amazing...
Interesting. I was going to say, point of accuracy, Lincoln didn't actually free any slaves.
Yeah, that's important to mention. So, Here, let's finish off with this. So, this is the Salian Hymn to Janus by Professor George Hempel, University of Michigan. 2 years ago, when seeking the source of the runes, I discovered the origin of the Latin letters G and Z. Interesting, because they are connected. You have Gimel and Zayin connected as well. In discovering the various Latin texts said to contain the letter Z, I succeeded in showing that the S corresponded repeated to stand in the line of the Salian hymn beginning Consuelo Dorieso was only a medieval spelling for C, and that Consuelo Dorioso, that's actually Consuelo Orioso of the Basel manuscript was a correct reading. I had accomplished my purpose, and because of lack of time, resisted the temptation to study further this most interesting bit of early Latin. When, however, Professor Kittredge of Harvard University expressed an interest in my interpretation of these two words, but wished to know how they could be explained as a portion of a hymn to Janus, I felt impelled to extend my study to the context. This paper may therefore be regarded as a humble offering made to Latin scholars by an Anglicist at the suggestion of a fellow Anglicist. In attempting to decipher an archaic Latin inscription, our chief difficulty consists in the meagerness of our knowledge of pre-classical Latin. In dealing with a piece of classical Latin that has come down to us in medieval manuscripts, we have to reckon with the possibility that the medieval scribe has made errors in the transmission of the text. But in confronting a piece of literature like the Salian hymn, we have to contend with both these disadvantages. Indeed, the fact that the original text was archaic Latin and thus largely unintelligible to the medieval copyist much increased the danger of his altering and copying, whether unintentionally or with the aim of putting it into what he supposedly would be a more correct form. The same phenomena. So that's what the in the other show I was in before, that someone was basically arguing is the case with Ke'ari, that it's actually Ke'aru. I mean, I don't know, but that's a tangent. But anyway, the same phenomena appear in the Old English manuscript runic alphabets, which were copied by scribes who were of an antiquarian turn of mind, but ignorant of the real character of which they were copying. Moreover, we have to deal with abbreviations and their resolution, and these, again, may be ancient or medieval. We have early evidence that there were abbreviations in the early received text of the Salian hymn, Festus 244 or 205, cf. below, and it is clear that others, for example, uo or uero, were introduced later, when the D of the ancient werod was no longer recognized as a part of the word. The various manuscripts differ from one another in the abbreviations they present and in the resolutions they offer of abbreviations in the text from which they were copied. Hence, we have to consider the pre-classical forms of Latin, early Latin abbreviations, the misinterpretation and alteration of these by medieval copyists, medieval abbreviations, and the shifting value of some of these. For example, I don't know what it is, us, later m or ke. Nevertheless, the vicissitudes that these three lines have suffered, except at the hands of commentators, are not many, and hence the number of corrections that have to be made is really small. The text, as can be expected, is best preserved in the three best manuscripts, namely F, V, and P. Spangle, page 127 F, and may be given as Consuelo Dorioso Omia Uo ad patula coemise ian cusianes duonus ceruses dunus ianus uniet po melios resum. So Consuelo Orioso, as shown in the paper alluded to above, the origin of Latin G and Z, transactions of the American Philological Association, page 30 and 39, etc., to which I refer the reader for a full presentation of the matter. The Z for C and F, and in the inferior A and M, is due to the fact that in the medieval ages, C before E was pronounced S, so Tsa, interesting, almost like a Tsade, for which the sound group Z and Sa were equivalent spellings, as they still are in German. The R for Sa in the inferior manuscripts, or the R for C, the R for Sa in the manuscripts. Wait, was that manuscripts? Yeah, in the manuscripts, G, H, and B is due to the fact that in the 11th century and for some time later, time after, the letters R and C were very similar in form. Wattenbach, Anleitung, page 46. Omnia needs no explanation. Uo, as stated above, the D of uerod was not understood and supposed to be the remnant of an original ad, which was therefore written and attached to the following patula. Hence the following uo adaptula, in which uo is one of the usual abbreviations for vero. One back, page 82. In the same way, the S of meliosum below prevented the medieval scribe from recognizing in the spelling the familiar meliorum. So it's not meliosum, it's a meliorum. And so not understanding the he separated it and made eum out of it, or eum of it. Compare also the attempt of the writer of manuscript M to make good Latin of the ares, or for arcs, by spelling res. Spengel, page 8. Yeah. Uero in the form uo, Wattenbach, page 82, was also taken for non, and so we find non written out in B. Such a uo or n was also taken for ne enim, and so we find ne in G, and the full enim in the related H. Koemise appears to be a misinterpretation of the basis of meaning esse, Wattenbach, page 82, of comie or coemise, which was meant for coemis s with final s written over the preceding vowel, Wattenbach, page 60. This could easily happen, especially in the mechanical. This is all important just to understand the context of this, just so you get it. But an early copyist may have regarded the o of orieso as marking a first singular of some verb or other, and coemise as an infinitive depending on it.
I was going to say, it's interesting as this is, why don't you cut to where the point that's relevant to the Giannis part?
Well, yeah, we're here now.
Okay.
But an early copyist may have regarded the O of Oriese as marking for singular of some verb or another, and coemise as an infinitive depending on it. A spelling like coemise is reflected in the seruse in M, which is evidently a copy of an older seruse, or seruse for seruses. Ion is for Ianos, or if the abbreviation is old, for Ianos, and may have been written Ion in the original text, Wattenbach, page 70, or without a sign of abbreviation. The abbreviation Ion or Jan was also misread and appeared as Iam in M and B, and in this Iam Custanes was then copied Iam Custanes in H. Cusianes for Cusiatos doubtless arose by the false interpretation of Cusiati or Cusiasho, for which there was a striking similarity between what's this, T-I and N. I might be misreading that. While it is often impossible to distinguish between final O and final E, the spellings duonos, serus, dunos, and ianos are due to the early substitution of the classical ios for the archaic ios. That which was done early in the transmission of this text is shown by the let's see. Dunos for duonos or dunos or duonos is an example of a very common. Okay, it's actually, where's the
One thing I did get out of what you had there, connections between Janus and Aeon.
Oh, I see how you got that.
And turning of the wheel sort of thing. And that, because that's what they were talking about there, it sounded like they were definitely going with an Aeon sort of, ion kind of concept.
Okay, so let's see. Here's where it has rendered. Let's see. Yeah, I'm going to just skip to the Let's see. Okay, here. Let's see. Okay. The worship of Janus in Rome was associated chiefly with the so-called Temple of Janus Quirinus in the Forum and the altar of Janus Curiatus at the. Oh, so yeah. So that word Cusiatos is probably Curiatos.
And what are you getting resonance from there at?
Oh, just here. So Janus Quirinus in the Forum and the altar of Janus Curiatus at the Tigillum Sororium.
Are you getting anything out of Curiatos?
What are you thinking of, like Kronos?
No, I'm thinking about the male the dancers that made the noise to protect the baby Zeus to drown out his noises. They were something like that.
Oh, interesting.
Let me. I'll take a quick look on that one. You keep looking up here.
So, Janus Curiatus at the Tigillum Sororium. The story of the struggle between the Horatians and the Curiatians, and of the murder of his sister, early attached itself to the spot and served to explain the names, whose true origins was buried in antiquity. Let's see. So, Duonos is the older form of bonos or bonos, so it means good or like, yeah. Seros is the masculine form of Ceres and signifies creator. Ueniet may be rendered will come, or with future force is coming or is going to come. With potissimos meliosum recum, compare the divum Deo, God of gods, in another fragment of the Salian hymn. And we're towards end. The whole rendered into English, come forth with a cuckoo. Interesting. That might be the connection to the cuckoo on the grandfather clock, or on the cuckoo clock.
No, that sounds like a good catch there. I looked up the Korates, and it's more commonly known in the Greek with the Korybantes.
Oh, interesting. I mean, maybe there's a connection in that, like the idea of the New Year's baby.
They were the 9 dancers that venerated Rhea, who was the Cretan counterpart for Cybele.
Well, and keep in mind she's also syncretized with Ceres, and here they're saying that he's Ceros.
Yeah, no, they were the dancers and the ecstatics, and no, interesting. I definitely think there may be something here.
So listen, so the whole may be rendered into English. Come forth with a cuckoo. Truly all things dost thou make open. So like, truly do you open all things. Thou art Janus Curiatus, the good creator. Art thou. Good Janus is coming, the chief of the superior rulers, or literally the chief of the chiefs. If thus appears that we have 3 lines, not necessarily consecutive, of the hymn that the Salian priests sang to Janus, when armed and bearing the ancilia, they marched with songs and dances about the city and its sacred places during the month of March. This is just about the time when the cuckoo passes over the Mediterranean from Africa to Europe and is universally hailed as the first harbinger of spring. So the ancient Italian deity Janus, or Janus, who opens up all things, who caused the spring to flow and the seed to germinate, Ceros, the benign creator, is invited to come with a cuckoo and usher in the spring. Wow, you definitely have some parallels there with like Baal, or with that, even with the idea of Moshiach, the idea of the Messiah.
This is 100% the Korates from Crete, because what they would do is they would march around with their swords and shields making noises in dancing around.
The other thing. Oh, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say this is absolutely them imported into Rome.
So the other thing is, do you have anything that pops in your mind, resonances with Quirinus?
The only thing that's hitting my head, and it's not a good one, is Ceranos, and that's the more of the Celtic horned god.
Yes, Cernunnos.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. And that probably is the connection of Old Latin religion to the later like Greco-Roman or yeah, Greco-Roman really.
Yeah, it's tough to get connections between the Greco-Roman and the Germans, and even that one is, there may be something there, but it's not strong. It's definitely somewhat of a stretch.
You don't think? Wait, you think it's a stretch?
At least a bit of a stretch. It's not super solid. It's like I said, it's tough to go from Rome up to German. It's
I
like,
I don't agree with that at all because I mean just think about the campaigns into Gaul. Like he
well,
literally.
I'm
Yeah.
talking from the mythology standpoint, because it's like Odin doesn't have there's no good correlate for Odin, because he's part Zeus, he's part Hermes. I mean, I'm going Greek there, but if you're going Roman, he's part Jupiter, he's part Mercury. He's not a good fit there. Tagging back to you.
I don't know. I think it fits pretty well, but here, let's see, where was I? I just had it pulled up. Shoot, where was it? Was it here? Oh yeah, here. This isn't. Yeah, this is just 4 minutes.
Male aspect in magic and the many. In this video, we discuss the male aspect in magic and the many faces of the horned god.
Also, keep in mind, Janus is depicted with horns in one of his faces.
Quick one here.
Yeah.
I'm not sure horned god versus green man is necessarily, those are a little bit different in the sense of male energies. But go on.
I mean, I think that, like for instance, you can see that Moses is another embodiment of that. He has horns, and he's also a shaman.
Oh, no, no, no. I'm just saying that there's the horned god is one aspect of the male energy, but the green man is a different one. That's more of a renewal aspect of the male energy.
Well, but that's the thing. Kernunos was associated with renewal.
No, I agree. He combined both of those, and that's where it's like some of them emphasize one or the other.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm Max Raven.
And I'm Cassandra Raven. Together, we have over 30 years' experience in the occult, witchcraft, and magic.
We share insight, knowledge, advice, and lifestyle tips to make your magic go further and add potency to your work. The god or male aspect is an essential part of magic and the counterbalance to the goddess. The god, like the goddess, has many different forms and goes by many different names. In his more positive aspects, he represents the sun, fertility, and growth. In his darker aspects, he can act as a psychopomp, a guide to the underworld and the death mysteries. These are some of his many names.
Okay, wait, yeah. So notice that duality. So fertility and growth, as well as a guide to the underworld.
These are some of his many names. The Celtic synonymous, Herne the Hunter from Shakespearean tale, the Green Man, whose foliage changes with the seasons. At midsummer he appears as the Oak King, in midwinter he is the Holly King. Or the Greek satire Pan, from whose name we get the word panic. All are guises of the Lord of the Sabbath, or Old One.
Unfortunately, the god gets rather a bad rap in Christianized history. This primal force of nature being twisted and subverted into the devil. Many accounts from witch trials across Europe make mention of him in some form or another. These tales talk of his appearance at the Sabbath or lonely crossroads, where the god can show himself in black bestial forms, such as a dog, a goat, a crow, or a raven, or the mysterious man in black. When working with the energy of the horned god, the mind will almost immediately jump to the image of Baphomet, a horned godlike figure that has enjoyed a relatively recent boom in popularity thanks to TV, film, and other media. This energy has been incorporated into mysticism and the occult, and the enigmatic figure really deserves a video in his own right.
But when we say the horn god, we mean something much older, more primal, an energy that has been in this collective subconscious for millennia, with far-reaching influences in magic and many different cultures. He can be represented by antlers, a deer or ram skull, or a witch's tool known as a stang. A stang is a horned ash staff that can be placed at the northern point of your ritual space to symbolize the horned god's presence as a guardian of portals, the underworld, and the initiator to the crooked path of the wise.
Guardian of portals.
When working with energies, it's important to build a relationship with them, to make yourself known so that they're more likely to work with you. It's a good idea to try and understand how their energy works. This is true of the horned god.
A few ways I have found to experience the energy of the horned god are: spend time in a darkened wood at night with only a candle to guide you. Stop and take a moment to try.
Oh yeah, you'll start panicking real quick.
Or perhaps take a trip to a barrow mound and take a moment to experience the energies there. Walk to a lonely crossroad mound and take a moment prying into the candle flame. Or perhaps take a trip to a barrow mound and take a moment to experience the energies there. Walk to a lonely crossroads and see what energies are present. You might catch a glimpse of him in his animal form. All of these are fantastic ways to get to know the strange and misunderstood being that is the horned god. His power is at its peak during the times betwixt, such as Samhain, the 12 nights of Christmas, and midnight.
Let us know if you have experienced working with this energy, or perhaps you've caught a fleeting glance of him at a crossroads. Tell us in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you enjoyed it. It helps more people see our videos. Thank you for watching.
You can tell their little jingles. They're trying to get just the first part of the Harry Potter jingle, so that way people will be like, "Oh, that sounds familiar," but what is it?
No, I was gonna say I don't mind that one. They're a little sloppy for my taste, and a little too smoothie-esque, because they're combining lots of different energies into one. It's basically they're almost saying there's only one male god, and they're all the horned god. And again, I'm a little off-put when people start, touting their credentials, because I hate that route. But that's me.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Your argument should stand not based on who you are, but what you say.
And it's like, I agree with them. It's like, yeah, the horn god has a certain male energy aspect, but there's more than that. There's, the one that they didn't touch on at all, and I think is a huge part of it, especially in the Germanic cultures, is the wild hunt. Because that's very much in that whole frenzy aspect, and again, it's almost like a group male sort of thing that happens in the fall. I don't know if you're familiar with the wild hunt at all.
Vaguely. Vaguely. Can you hear me?
Yeah, no, I can hear you.
I didn't know if you were going to expand on that.
Oh, it's basically the idea of, it's the traditional thought is Saronis/Odin especially is thought to be the leader of the wild hunt. And it's the idea of sort of ghost riders in the sky is the old cowboy version of it, where if you hear the call, you can respond to it and get called out and join the wild hunt, and they go around and they kill, and you don't want to be on the bad side of them and get caught into it, and you don't know whether you're going to join them in being in the killing or being the killed. So that's pretty much it. I'll tag to you, Ariel.
Interesting. So yeah, I figure we'll just end off with a little bit of footage from this, because I think that we kind of got right into the perfect to talk about, Pernonos. Also, forgive the RT. I hate Russia Today, but it's literally the only full footage I could find of it. Oh, yeah, Uthal. She's really good. I've gotten multiple of my videos struck for playing her songs, but honestly, it's fine because it's really good.
Yeah, no, the first time I saw this, it was like, could they be more obvious with all their symbolism?
Honestly, at a certain point, it just kind of makes me wonder how much of this is just to drum up people going through it so that they'll get tolls. I mean, like, how much fun about this is all just to get people to use the tunnel?
Oh, no. I don't rule out anything. And the tunnel's an incredible technological achievement.
This is sped up twice, by the way. Interesting. Do you know anything about this, Graham? The doorway effect?
Yeah, that's the idea of you basically you're almost each doorway is a transition from one universe to another, and the idea of separate spaces.
That sounds like something from a video game, like rendering.
No, it's more modern magic theory.
By the way, this is sped up 2 times.
Yeah, because they're clearly supposed to be the construction workers.
Wait, are you trying to tell me that these aren't actual construction workers?
Well, no, they're actual construction workers. The things that do the work are the machines.
Wait,
well, can't you tell you have the whole rainbow aspect there, especially in the helmets? You're definitely hitting the whole European multiculturalism.
I guess my point though is like, are they like actors or dancers, or are they actually the people who?
Oh no, these are dancers. This is all choreographed routine show.
That's what I thought, but then you said that. I was like, well, I mean, maybe they are the ones who did it.
Oh, I was making a joke. Sorry, Ariel.
So Beware said, a mental rendering. It's psychological. Interesting. Is that the same thing you're talking about?
I think so. Only she's talking about it from the psychological aspect.
Wait, what's this? I thought we were going to Cancun.
It's like, we have an angel going through the tunnel. Why?
Why does that have a weird baby head? What do you make of the weird baby head?
What, on the angel?
Yeah.
I don't even know. Obviously trying to evoke some sort of cherub thing. Of course, what immediately pops into my head is an angel trapped in the tunnel.
So, what with the chains?
Yeah, buried angel trapped in the tunnel.
Also, I don't know if you saw that, but it looked like a cannon. Maybe it's like an allusion to this. Yeah, is that a cannon?
I don't think so. It looks more like an old school train.
Okay, now the angel's unleashed. Okay, now we got Kernunos.
So the angel just vanished, I take it.
Maybe the
We'll see.
implication is that it is the angel.
No, there.
This is so freaking bizarre.
Is that supposed to be a monkey?
I don't know.
George Washington the goat? The other thing I like to do when I watch these is sort of estimate how much they spent on this, and I'm figuring what they spent, $10-20 million on this whole production.
Oh yeah, don't you know it's just a giant money laundering scheme.
Is it monthly laundering if you're just paying yourself?
Yes.
Okay. I wasn't sure if that qualified. Because I know it's not technically insider trading if Congress does it.
But hey, I mean, if you're going to money launder, you might as well make some cool art out of it. By the way, that's not a condoning of money laundering. I'm just saying, if you are, might as well.
You end up with something to show for it, at least.
Oh, is this like what they were talking about with the ash trees or the stabs that are put in the north corner?
Yeah. And another horn, yeah.
So, do you think those are props or you think they're real? I mean, obviously,
well, the lamb is obviously a prop.
Yeah.
The animal horns, I think, most of the animal horns, I think, are real. I don't think that sparkly thing is real though. Furry-esque sparkly thing. No.
You mean to tell me that's not a natural shade or color in nature?
Not that I've ever seen. Oh, those could be dreadlocks. That's Cousin It from the Addams Family.
Yeah, and then there you have all the Carnunos imagery or pan imagery.
You think they could have paid some money to get a better looking head than that one?
Let's see, I'm going to skip ahead a bit.
Oh, what are they going to do to the old dude?
Yep, Saul said it. If you're going to do something wrong, make sure you do it right.
That's the Ed Wood theory of filmmaking. Make it so bad it's good.
Kind of like this guy singing. Hey, Chthonius. Yeah, we're just watching this right now, looking at the Carnunos and the Janus symbology in this. Wait, what? Eshu?
Garuba.
Oh wait, this is a different goat. This is
This
the goat.
looks like music calming the beast, and that looks like something from Where the Wild Things Were. Rome.
Interesting. Oh, that's hilarious. They're being pushed by a what is it? Bulldozer. What the heck?
You weren't expecting that transition, Ariel.
No, not particularly.
You need to go to more circuses. And I actually was kind of joking when I said that. But I have to say, there's some resonance about the Pope being driven around in a clown car.
Ah, true. Well,
Sort of a mini Pope mobile.
more so like the idea of multiple people fitting into one tiny car. Yeah, Graham said now then. Sorry, not Graham. Uthal said now the industrial age. Here, I also threw the link to join in the chat if y'all want to hop in. I mean, we're finishing up after this, but I figured I'd put it in there. The Victorian and modern age, definitely a theme that I can pick up on. Oh yeah, now you're dealing with like modernity, like or post-modernity. No worries, Petonius. Love to work. Slack-jawed yokel stopping progress.
Those are some truly interesting hats.
I mean, seriously, like, how much you want to bet it was like $5,000 for your hat?
Oh, I sure hope whoever sold them those hats charged them $5,000 a hat.
Yeah, except you're charging yourself that money.
Oh no, somebody had to make it. Whoever did the actual work to make it, that's not part of the thing. They don't.
Good morning, bro. Ooh, 6 a.m. class. Oof, that sounds painful.
I had one of those. Psychology 101.
Are you sure it wasn't psychological torture 101?
I'm pretty sure it actually was, since it was a foreign led by a foreign TA. First 15 minutes, you watched a presentation by the head of the psychology department that was pre-recorded.
Oh, okay. Look at this. Now you have a lot of like, was it Horde of Babylon imagery? Like the lady in red.
No, I was going to sit there and say, there's your red color again.
Jujitsu. Yeah, I guess there's a reason to do that bright and early. Gets you ready for the day.
Yeah, it gets the body moving.
No, stop the train. It's going to crash. It's going to crash into the whole thing. I'm joking. I know it now. It won't.
Speed 3. We need Keanu Reeves.
Imagine if, like, you know, all of a sudden the snow just starts falling, but it actually started falling for the rocks. And now you've got, like, it looks like almost like a vault opening, you know?
Exactly. I was going to say they broke open through the tunnel and unleashed something. And they're combining their drilling machine with some sort of multi-tentacled demon sort of shape in the video.
I don't get it. Arctic Bowl.
Note how they're flanked by the military there.
What do you mean? Oh, I see.
The drummers, and you also have, you know, the shield. You have basically a representative military guard on each side.
And are those actual military, or are they actors as well?
Those are actors as well. This is all actors.
It's also good to Holly Berserker.
And my guess is now that they've gotten rid of all the orange stuff, the work's done. They definitely have the, yeah, that's a military band there.
Wait, so it's actual military?
Oh, they may be an actual military band. They exist.
No, I know. That's why I was asking if you meant.
Oh, I don't know for sure, for certain. But even if they're military band, they're still players.
Oh, you see how they're like rolling down?
There are only 3 up there now. There used to be 4 or so. So you're definitely down to a trinity.
Or like the 3 people on the cross.
That's again, yep.
And now they're falling.
Like a sacrifice. Oh, grasping hands. Yeah, definitely.
Oh, that's a reference to hell, isn't it? Entrance to hell.
But they're making it look like heaven here.
אלי תחתית נבוא נשמתנו להשיב. אוי אדוני
With an eye, too.
בן רקיע ואחיו הלל למלך הרצוח הרחוע בנבוא.
All of them dressed as like brides.
Probably slash or not.
השב מן המתים רעות יאור ירים נגיל ונדון על אוסף
Oh yeah.
And they also switched with their trinity from 3 men to 3 women now.
Yeah, it's also Hebrew. And yeah, so I found this really cool Hebrew music that talks about different. I mean, most of it's like midnight music.
Now, Ariel,
Yeah.
is this an Alp thing, or is this reminiscent of blowing the shofar? Did you see him on the side?
That's an Alp thing.
I'm not willing to rule out it's a resonance of both.
ועם חיי וחטאי כבדו לנוכח
Obviously, Egyptian scarab motif. And 18th dynasty, they were the big scarab ones.
חסד החיות גמלת לכפר מזמור לאמתך קלת
And now you have the clear connection of Beauty and the Beast right before it.
I was going to say, you also have Heroes Gamos.
Yeah, Catonia. Like, that shoe juxtaposed rolling feet is interesting. Wait, is it like, is the goat giving birth now? Is that the implication you're getting?
That's sort of what I'm going down. It's either that or constipation, and I'm figuring birth makes more sense.
Is that Latin? Yeah, that's Latin.
That was definitely some hair.
What?
That woman's hair. Did you see her walking down the steps? Yeah.
Oh.
There.
Oh, do you mean the woman that's singing?
No, the woman that was right in front there with the white blouse and the hair. There, and right in front.
That's not
That's.
her hair. That's a hat.
Are you sure that's not her hair done up there in soup and done up like that? And she shaved her head. It looks like a shaved head there, Ariel.
No, I'm 100% sure.
Okay.
Yeah, it looked like that at first, but no.
With as much they're paying, women would do it. But yeah.
No, you can literally see a strap that's securing it to her head.
Oh no, the bottom part. I was talking about the top part.
Yeah, I know. You can see this thing that. What do you mean the bottom part?
The bottom part around her ears definitely is not. But I'm saying the top above that looks shaved, and the whatever that extended thing on the top of her head is.
No, that's what I'm saying. The strap is securing that to her.
Okay. It looks like, I don't know. It's definitely a look.
I mean, it's not really a look, but it's a look, but not a look you should go for.
Not intentionally. Maybe they're trying to imply that the horned guy's dead, but I don't think so. I so want them dressed as a cowboy, a construction worker, a police officer, and a Native American. You have a horned chick now.
Wait, she has horns?
My bet is you're going to have one dancer at least for each country. What? I'm sure those three heads are supposed to be somebody, but I don't know who.
Yeah, I think John is going to
My guess is the woman in red would be Spain with a flamenco dancer.
Oh, wow, yep. Oh, and here's the thing that made me think that we should talk about this tonight. What do you think what I am?
Kronos?
In a sense. Or Janus. Yeah, probably more Kronos. We're literally bowing down before the clock.
Yeah, no. That group strikes me as much more Saturnian than Janus. Biosol. They're celebrating against the train running on time. I know we're missing somebody, not knowing who those three people are.
What? It's like going off into the heaven?
Yep, that's it.
Interesting. So yeah, that's a good place to end off here. But yeah, this was fun.
Absolutely. Good Janus, opening and closings.
Yeah, so wow, yeah. I know. Here, let's just share some last thoughts and we'll close off in a minute.
Yeah, no, I think we definitely hit on to something with this idea of Janus and the whole Katam and the Bronze Age collapse. That's a story that we need to definitely go back on and probably spend some actual real work trying to figure out what correlates with stuff. But I think we hit something huge there.
Definitely. This is some interesting stuff that I'm going to bring to my class tomorrow. Given it's not the one that's about Judaism, but this one, my teacher, he's really good. Dr. Blake Hartung, his area of expertise is on like the Desert Fathers of early Christianity. But the class is on what is it? It's Christianity. It's like heretics, saints, and emperors, or something like that. And so he knows a lot about this type of stuff. So a lot about the Greco-Roman world. But anyway, so I figured we could end this off at 420. So happy 420, everyone. And all.
Want to tell the Rebbe the words of the new song that we're singing with Mashiach, right? So I'm just going to read them. Am Yisrael, have no fear. Mashiach will be here this year. We want Mashiach now. We don't want to wait. Okay? We want Mashiach now. We want Mashiach now. Oh yeah, I'm Yisrael, have no fear, Moshiach will be this year. I'm Yisrael, have no fear, Moshiach will be here this year. We want Mashiach now, we want Mashiach now, we don't want to wait. We want Mashiach now, Mashiach now, we don't want to wait. I'm Yisrael, have no fear, Moshiach will be here this year. I'm Yisrael, have no fear, Moshiach will be here this year. We want Mashiach now, we want Mashiach now, we want Mashiach now, we don't want to wait. We want Mashiach now, we want Mashiach now, we want Mashiach now, we don't want to wait. Hey! Mashiach will be here this year. I'm Yisrael, have no fear, Mashiach will be